Let this be a reminder to you all that this organization will not tolerate failure.
The side of the federal building has been blown off, Jesse.
They believe they were part of a CIA project called MK Ultra.
Just like a segment of society that is not living in reality.
In a certain sense, we're kind of a little bit more Israel's vassal state.
There are police chiefs facilitating prostitution networks.
Do you understand? It's all in your head. It's your move.
What up, everybody? Welcome to the Underclass podcast with myself, Austin Wade Picard. And today we have a conversation that obviously is inevitable to continue. And I think, as always, is more relevant as the days progress, obviously, because I think that the Satanic Panic narrative in general, as we were discussing privately in terms of the witch hunt, is forever relevant, right? And I think, especially considering not only Epstein, but things we've been talking about in the recent kind of past couple of weeks, like satanic sex sacrificing cults tied to the Vatican, things of that nature. It's never ending. So I figured, as I should prioritize, I guess, bringing back on Jacob from Rise to Liberty, and obviously the producer for Already Dead, and my brother, to have a very important and pivotal conversation on something that I think affects all of us, unfortunately. So what's up, brother?
Not much, dude. Just living the dream in a satanic world, I kind of feel like that's what it is. It literally is all over the place. So, I think you're right. I think it's more relevant than anyone wants to admit. And honestly, I think it's really important to actually focus on this side of things, because most people actually don't get into the whole like Satanism thing, the occult thing, the MK Ultra thing. Like, they talk about it, they skim it, but they don't really get into it, because honestly, dude, this is what they believe. Like, this is their religion. It's the old religion, it's Satanism before it had a name,
Exactly. So there's a reason that it just is overlapping in terms of the nature of this ideology and how it just permeates all throughout these evidentiary connections and avenues connecting to all these strange cases that just obviously inevitably overlap and have these kind of key perpetrators of prominence that are clearly resurfacing all throughout these various cases. And so
dude, and it's everywhere. Like as a former Satanist, dude, I can't walk anywhere without stepping in shit.
Right. I bet, man.
Like, it's crazy. And the fact that like some people just don't want to acknowledge it is I don't know. I don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it doesn't matter what you believe. It matters what these sick fucks believe. And what they believe is what we're about to talk about.
I remember whenever I covered, I think it was the Hosanna Church scandal and the Delphi murders, right? And I just kind of connected the two.
Right.
I basically just said we must first understand the reconstructed ideology of our enemy if we are to defend against them. Right. And I felt like there's no better way than, unfortunately, overexposing yourself to the clear and what seems to be, very much reinforced and corroborated evidence, right? It's like, that's what I focus on, the things that I can prove. Obviously, it's always interesting to consider the outliers and the kind of strange surface level connections, that there's definitely something more to them, but unfortunately, because there's not this pivotal, let's just say reliable sort of source material that you can sort of provide to the public as a just a I think a foundational pillar in propping up the entire argument, that they constructed this manufactured misconception, as I put it, right, in order to essentially undermine and oversimplify a reality that's
Right.
plaguing general society at large, and that is this sinister form of satanic ritual abuse that is clearly being very much practiced, and I think hyperactive in terms of the political leaders and power cabal behind the
Right.
scenes that are at these, I think, far too close at the very least to these kind of pivotal positions where they can pull those levers of power. And man, there's something to just never turning a blind eye, as much as it does,
Right.
unfortunately harm our delicate sensibility, because it's an extraordinary, sinister form of evidence that shocks you to your core. But man, if we don't expose ourselves to this, then we will never truly understand that viable threat that we face, and unfortunately.
These are supposed to be our adversaries, and
Mhm.
I promise you, they study their adversaries, right?
Right.
They study what Christians do. They study what non-believers think and believe. Now, also, Satanists, a lot of like genuine Satanists, just look down upon society as a whole. I mean, they refer to them as the dead, like, yeah, they think that society as a whole is so brainwashed and so like apathetic to what is actually happening that they might as well be dead.
And
And
already
then,
dead, huh?
right,
Yeah.
right. And
That's
so,
hilarious.
right. And I mean, I referred to people like that when I was a Satanist. It's
Uh,
like the mindset is that like you guys don't even know what's going on out there in the world. And it's true, most people don't. Most people don't even give a shit, you know? And so that's why Satanists refer to people as the dead, because it's like you guys are so brainwashed, like you just you don't even know. So
right.
thank
Man,
you.
I couldn't agree more, brother. And yeah, I appreciate all you guys for showing up. And obviously, if you guys think of anything that applies and is relevant to the things we're discussing, I'm more than willing to consider shooting off in a different direction at any moment. Obviously, Schizo Bros is simple as always, but no, I did think I was reading back through a lot. I've just been focusing, unfortunately, on Project Monarch a little bit. I would say too much, because it is a it's been sort of a priority in my life in a way, just
Right.
because I feel like I continually find these very um, I think, again, an evidentiary window, right, that seems far more credible than anyone would ever imagine, especially considering the allegations attached to it, right?
Right.
And when it comes down to it, man, I was reading back through about the bloodlines, essentially, and the genealogical aspect and component to a lot of the programming involved, apparently, in terms of inducing dissociative identity disorder in these child victims. And it's always at a very young age, right? And I
Mhm.
think we had the discussion at one point, and I even asked you to send me the source material on that connection to, obviously, the kind of the fetus itself, right, in
Right.
early stages, still in the uterus, being effectively, tortured, right, in the very first
Yeah.
phase of to
Dude,
basically
I
set
mean,
them up for their programming.
they'll do it even before that. Like they will start traumatizing the mom before she's even pregnant. So that way even the pregnancy and the act of her being pregnant is traumatic for the mom. So like
Right.
that's how far these sick fucks will go. Like
100%.
that's how far they've already thought. Like, so this is pretty disturbing, but one of the ways that they'll traumatize the mom when she's pregnant is they'll drop her off in the woods naked,
Oh my God.
and then she has to find her way back. Like
That's so terrible.
right?
Yeah. I think,
And it doesn't matter, like summer, it could be 100 and something degrees out. They'll drop her off middle of winter, no shoes. She has to find her way back. And it's just like some of the most horrific things ever. You know, it's like, how could you ever do that to a person?
right. Yeah, and I mean, it reminds me, unfortunately, of the human hunting parties that are arranged in the in circuit in terms of the Dutroux affair and Kincora as well.
Right.
And so much of this is like,
And the Mother of Darkness Chateau, you know?
yeah, exactly. And I think X1 in the dossier, she gave birth to, this is just reinforcing what you just kind of laid out and illustrated. And she basically gave birth to her first daughter, Cheyenne, who was born in February 79, but disappeared 6 weeks later. Right. And by the way, very interesting, obviously, the overlap to the baby making factory at Zorro Ranch and the fact that all of those women branded with blue butterflies, right, who essentially woke up on an operating table, fully paralyzed with eggs removed from, their bodies, right? I mean, it's just like imagining the implications of that, right, in terms of the enterprise and the network and how they would exploit that thoroughly. But after the disappearance of X1's child, right, infant child, she basically, was abused and beat like regularly to essentially have her continually carry out the orders of sexually blackmailing these primary targets and priority targets. And I think this is when she was effectively really, the grooming process continued in a real way in terms of her handler, Tony Vandenbogert, I think was his name, who like was given a key by the grandmother and the mother, right, to actually go and enter the home at any point in time he felt necessary to pick up his child prostitute, unfortunately, which was Regina Louf. And it's terrible. But yeah, I think whenever you realize, though, that you basically have in her testimony, I think I referred to it once before, the factory of the films, right? And she essentially claims that she had undergone the most extreme, horrific event that you could ever imagine at this factory, the ASCO factory of Roger Boaz, I believe, who happened to essentially on their CIA and Mossad connections to running Iran-Contra through this facility and operation, essentially through many different business fronts, but this was just one of them, right? And she claimed that a child pornography and snuff film studio had been located at this factory. And so I think she even referred to it specifically as the factory of the films, and that she had been taken there many different times. She witnessed the murder of her daughter, right? And it happened apparently around 3 years after giving birth to Cheyenne. And she had been abused, tortured, and several different abusers that day, apparently, for 2 days straight, I guess. And so this little girl was like 2 years old, I think, so it wasn't quite 3. But don't you recognize her, pussycat, is what Rick told her. This is what she said in her testimony. They say that a mother always recognizes her daughter. Look at her. This is your daughter, sweetie pie, and you can save her life. Do what we ask you to do, and we kill you. If you don't, we kill her. X1 begged Rick not to do this, but Rick proceeded to put a knife in X1's hand and forced her to mutilate her own vagina. This is legitimate, man. Like, when you read through this, I hate to be so, obviously, I'm not, for the sake of being, too graphic. I'm not trying to essentially do it for that sake alone. Obviously, I just think when you understand the sinister nature and the level of abuse taking place in these networks, you'll no longer, I think, be able to sit, idly by and essentially do nothing. It will, at the very least, spur you into further research and hopefully, acquiring primary source material and documents that will help prove out the evidence that these are not just extraordinary allegations with no core evidence to the claims.
Well, here's the thing that people need to understand also is that testimony is actually primary source.
Right.
So, like when you go to court, testimony from a victim or a survivor is primary source information.
Right.
So, I mean, it's funny because I always hear this like proof. Where's the proof? I don't know. All the survivors who have, you know, dared come forward, even if they are like still anonymous,
Right.
like just the fact that they would even put this down on paper for anybody, you know, it's like,
100%.
and
It's so sad, man.
the sheer number of these people coming forward for decades, you know, is insane. And then you look at the one organization that was supposed to be on the side of truth, which is the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, right? Like that's apparently their whole existence is like, we don't want people going away for crimes they didn't commit. Okay, I stand behind that. You know, that's a good thing to do. I don't want people going away or being accused of these crimes if they didn't do it, because this is life ruining, right?
Oh yeah.
But when you look at that organization and all they did was just intimidate people and lie about them and then silence victims and survivors, it's like, well, there you go. Why would you silence these people if you're on the side of truth? You know, like,
Judge Conrad that was attached to this case until he had the audacity to attend the event that was held in honor of the victims' families after the major political scandal that was the Dutroux affair. This judge is in my opinion, everything I can find on him, he does not seem compromised. He seemed like he was fully equipped with integrity in terms of his pursuit, involved in this case. And obviously, the conflict of interest was not the real priority, because who did they replace him with? None other than an individual of prominence who is linked directly to the perpetrators, one being Michelle Nihul, the key front runner in terms of the leader of the network itself. "I am the monster of Belgium," if you remember, was his quote.
Yep.
"I will never be held accountable because I have, condemning sexual blackmail on tape of all of these various figures, including King Albert," right? Who he said he had a tape of of him raping a 12-year-old boy, and if that's, it's just like, it's too much to, in terms of how he explained, Judge Conrad, the way he described the network. He said it was a well-organized and systematically entrenched child sex mafia, right? And I mean, I just thought it was a great way, to essentially just really reflect on the network at large in a real sense, and especially the kind of international scope of it, right? Because, my God. But anyway, enough with Dutroux, because it's too dark, honestly, and we have enough darkness to discuss, and that one I've focused on too many times in the past. So I feel like
there is one quote I have here that kind of ties in what we were getting at. Dr. Catherine Gold, an Encino, California-based child therapist specializing in ritual abuse, found that, quote, "Mind control is originally established when the victim is a child under 6 years old. During this formative stage of development, perpetuating cult members systematically combine disassociation, enhancing drugs, pain, sexual assault, terror, and other forms of psychological abuse in such a way that the child disassociates the intolerable traumatic experience."
Oh my God, man.
Right.
Yeah. I just think it's like the conversation we were having the other day in reference to the just sort of prenatal Project Monarchs systematic techniques, I guess they utilize. And I saw in utero, there was one claim that it was around 28 weeks, right, that this would apply, and I think that's apparently due to the dimethyltryptamine that's produced by the pineal gland, right? Potentially has been what it's associated to, and I think it was that basically at that exact moment is when you have the fetus strategically agitated, and with this elongated needle of some kind. I forget
Yes.
the term of what the needle is called, but yeah, apparently that is when the initiation of this first phase of trauma. That's
Yep.
inevitably, I think, the purpose of it is to essentially condition the victim, right, for its future programming in a
Right.
real way. That's
You
fascinating, right?
you know what I particularly found really sick about the first stages of this, because you're right, there is that injection of the long needle into the uterus, which, holy fuck, dude.
I
What?
know.
No wonder, a lot of this came from the Nazis. Like,
Yeah.
no shit. Like that and what was it, lab 7731 or 7736 or whatever from Japan. Like, no wonder why a lot of this shit came from these two places. But the one thing that I thought was really sick was after the child's born, there's a period, I think it's like 1 to 2 years, where they shower the kid with love and all the affection and the skin touching and everything that they need. And then at the end of that period, they stop and ignore the child.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah, it sounds like
So they're
Kaczynski
like
a little bit. You
creating
remember that
a
report?
psychopath. Right.
Remember that report of Kaczynski
Mhm.
being separated from his mother at birth, and like as
Mhm.
an infant, they essentially, I know they have the prenatal care units or whatever, right? What's it called?
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, I just think that was a much different scenario, obviously, and what
Right.
he would inevitably become, I think, is very interesting. But yeah, especially after his time at Harvard, which we obviously know there was definitely behavioral modification experimentation conducted.
Right.
No, what I found to be fascinating as well is the hidden genealogical factor. That I think is heavily involved in a lot of these child victims and how they're chosen, even how
Right.
they're. I think many of these cases are potentially even satanic fertility rituals for that very purpose, for the child
Right.
victim to always inevitably be used for this sort of operation, right? And in
Well,
this kind of
that's
way.
because they found out during MK Ultra that not everyone can be broken like this.
Right.
Like
You're
certain
totally right.
certain bloodlines are more able to be broken and disassociate. And that's one of the reasons I believe for things like the GATE program in schools. It's because they're able to basically test all the kids and find everyone who is able to disassociate, and they have some list somewhere, tracking what bloodlines go where, right?
Wow.
I mean, why wouldn't they?
Yeah, no. Right. And that's what I think they called it. They called it bloodlines and twinning. When I read the Project Monarch, I forget. I think it was a book but anyway, it was very interesting because that was a portion of the book was going into the fact that these are multi-generational satanic families that are apparently involved in this, and so you have ostensibly programming this was interesting, and this is actually from Ron Patton, and I found this part to be fascinating, and it's the Project Monarch document that he produced, where he goes into all the, I think it was what we were talking about the other day, that referenced the basically adjoining root systems of the Kabbalistic tree of life being a part of the altars and the dissociative
Right.
identity disorder concept. But this part was later down in the document. Essentially, it's fascinating. He goes into bloodlines, and he's talking about how many of these victims were potentially programmed to, quote, fill their destiny as the chosen ones or chosen generations, which is a strange way to put it. But this was apparently a term coined by Mengele himself at Auschwitz, right? Which is interesting. But
Right.
apparently some are adopted out of families of similar origin. Others used in the neurological nightmare are deemed as the expendable ones, the non-bloodliners, usually coming from orphanages, foster care homes, or incestuous families with a long history of pedophilia. We have seen this. This was Claudia Mullen. Her grandfather, even her father and grandfather, sexually abused her. What brought up on charges, and after basically given an offer they couldn't refuse. It's kind of the Kathy O'Brien playbook in a way.
Right.
They joined the network and the enterprise while procuring child victims, for this kind of avenue of operation. It's very interesting.
Right. And see, this is actually what I believe gives Kathy O'Brien legitimacy, is because her story is not uncommon. It can be verified. Now, I don't think every little tiny detail of her story is correct,
Right.
just like I don't think of any survivor's story.
Especially considering who her husband became, right? The psychiatrist or whatever who helps her rebuild her entire adult personality in a way, and essentially heal from the abuse she had experienced. And that always definitely, and especially considering how heavily involved he is in her interview processes and all these other, kind of interesting aspects of their relationship dynamic. But what's interesting is that also applies as far as apparently this pattern of family members affiliated with government or military intelligence agencies, obviously being a key priority. Many of them come from or are abused, come from families who are Catholic, Mormons, or charismatic Christianity as a front. This is what they're saying. Is that
this is where they hide, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a perfect cover. Who would ever question, the good little Christian?
Exactly. And by the way, first thought that I have is of Kanakuk, right? Because we talked about that not too long ago. And I completely just watching through a little bit of this strange kind of Vice segment that they had done on this back. I can't remember the actual date when they covered this, but it was fascinating. And again, it shows how much they utilize the religious institutions as essentially an avenue for this purpose. And I remember my buddy, I grew up obviously in Northwest Arkansas, right? Right. And my good friend, and Kanakuk, it was located in Branson, Missouri, right? This is where it was founded, and that's not far at all. We would go to Branson for vacation. It's the Ozarks. It's right nearby,
right.
And yeah, there's a lot of Iran-Contra evidence as far as the historical example of using that geographical area for the enterprise itself, and that never ended in as far as the drug trafficking and weapons trafficking, and none of that ever essentially it never boiled down to only utilizing those opportunistic windows alone, right? I think legitimately always extended to child sex trafficking and the worst, most sinister form of the black market that you could ever imagine, being a sort of let's just say, in terms of the operation and enterprise itself, propped up.
Well, because that's at the bottom, that's what you get. That is the bottom of the black market. Mm-hmm. Because, and what's crazy is children is a form of currency to these people. Right. Most of the time, money isn't even exchanged. Yeah. It's favors, right? Because it's usually somebody who's connected somehow. And
JJ's panic, dude. I knew we were gonna have a panic attack in here.
I know, dude. I'm freaking out right now too. So the children are the currency to these people, so this is why the kids get passed around, and there's usually not a lot of money that gets busted with human trafficking. Has anyone ever thought of that? There's no money, there's just all these kids.
Yeah,
because the kids are the currency.
100%, man. And I think that they have legitimate child prostitution auctions, and
100%.
I don't think only for prostitution, obviously, but child auctions, I guess, is another way to put it. But it's,
dude, we have more human slavery on this earth than we ever have in recorded human history. And it's children are obviously part of that because they're the most innocent. And you would have to be an evil piece of shit to honestly be involved with this, right? And so,
Absolutely,
mean,
man.
take
see,
the innocent, and like protecting the children has always been part of every culture, right? Because when the barbarians would come into the village or whatever, we'd always protect what? The women and the children, right? Because those were always the first people to be stolen out of the village.
Right.
Like, you know, so this isn't new.
No. And after reading through, remember the modern tribute of modern, or the maiden tribute of modern Babylon that we talked about the other day, that newspaper article from
Right.
1885, and I was considering the notion, and I think Simon Dovey himself actually kind of alluded to this in a way, but didn't say it flat out, overtly in a way. But it was basically throughout the French Revolution at that time, right? If you're considering the French aristocracy heavily involved in this, satanic child sex abuse, which they're clearly procuring this sort of peasant class of children, not only, but definitely that was I think an easy avenue of procuring these children at the time.
Oh, dude,
right?
dude, I just rewatched the Jeffrey Epstein documentary on Netflix yesterday. It's called Filthy Rich.
Yeah.
And I forgot how close, because he lived in Palm Beach, right, on Billionaires Row, and I forgot how close West Palm Beach was, right? It's literally across the bridge, and then like the two economic classes
story of West Palm Beach like being burnt to the ground to like basically they like had this whole, I think it was in regard to like they were claiming it was racial, but in reality it was just kind of like the slave peasant class built up Palm Beach, and then basically were living in a portion of Palm Beach when they were apparently doing the construction. And then when all the construction was finalized and finished, then all the kind of nobility in the area, I guess, or the elite class that were going to move into those homes that were just built, basically held a party where they, for all those families, and forced them, it was like mandatory that they all go. And I think they all boarded boats to even get to where the party was going to be held. And then while that was happening, there was this massive fire that was never solved as far as why this arson kind of occurred. And the entire area for those peasants, slave labor individuals that were living just was destroyed. I found that to be fascinating in itself.
Yeah. And it's just like the two economic classes has always been that way in Palm Beach and West Palm Beach, right? And that's directly where Epstein recruited from, was all the high schools and the junior highs or middle schools, whatever, over in West Palm Beach.
Wow.
Because he was paying the girls $200 a pop to come and, let him fondle them and
then also
give him a massage.
He would spur those girls to help procure other girls, right? And they would
100%.
And then he would pay them
$200 a pop.
Yeah, he would pay them more for each girl they would procure.
And they wouldn't have, the added benefit of having to touch him.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Like fucking sick fuck. He's such a sick fuck.
For real. But the only point I was kind of making when I was just referencing that strange timing of the French Revolution, and what I found interesting was the liberal use of the guillotine at the time, right? It's like, now wouldn't that be, and this is the thought that occurred to me, is wouldn't that be almost a natural reaction inherently if you found out that a massive portion of the aristocracy at the time in the region are sexually abusing and kidnapping and abducting your children? And then sexually, in a blood ritual, sacrificing them as well. I mean, if you found out about this, would you not want to, I don't know, potentially decapitate the individual perpetrator? who actually, now,
I don't know, man. I probably would feel the same.
That's kind of how I thought. But I mean, there's probably no better consequence in terms of the sinister nature of a pedophile and what they ultimately deserve in my mind. But who am I to make that decision? I'm only kind of imagining the world where that potentially did happen, and many of those people who were essentially sacrificed at the guillotine were actual perpetrators and maybe lower level, and
Right.
people were more willing to
Well, and
allow them
why
to be
did it
sacrificed.
keep happening too? Right.
Mhm.
And what's interesting is like a lot of this like super liberalized belief system that always ends up being acceptance of pedophilia, right? Usually comes from France.
Oh, you're totally right. That's
So
interesting.
just saying, you can trace a lot of it back. So, you know,
That's hilarious. I know there was a video that I had told you about privately that a listener of our shows had sent to me. I think it was yesterday, honestly, and I had never seen this video. It's right outside the Bohemian Grove, and
right,
essentially this individual is claiming that he was involved in the kidnapping and abduction of a child who was ritualistically sacrificed at the Grove, and that he did this on the orders of Michael Aquino. Okay, and he mentions Paul Benassi, he mentions, John DeCamp, right?
right.
And he also did mention the individual we spoke on Operation GCD the other day, who was, I believe, what was his name? Franklin victim David Schurter, I believe was his name.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting story in its own right. But I will say, before I play that video, I thought this kind of plays into what we're discussing. And it's essentially that you have victim survivors respond more readily, apparently, to rigid, religious, dogmatic, legalistic, hierarchical structures because it parallels their base programming.
Right.
This is that I found it to be, and just a it makes sense, right? It fits, and it's a pattern recognition that it's hard to deny, but at the same time, so it does, just as far as like these organizations that were just the finders as an example, right? I mean, it's just they clearly were utilizing this strange religious concept, right, within their ideological practice, and it was almost like a hybrid form of occult ideology playing into like
Right.
religious foundational pillars, right, that were kind of propping up the concept in general. Very
Dude,
strange. But it does make
it's
sense.
versions of the new age, right?
Totally right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, that was the second half really of MK Ultra. You know, it was the cybernetics and the introduction of the CIA into the cult and occult underworld, which was the introduction in the 60s of the new age.
Right.
You know, and that's
Age
where
of
all of
Aquarius.
this comes from. So,
Mhm. The Great
know?
Reset, the Age of Aquarius. It's all,
Right,
one
right.
concept in my mind.
This is why I can't fucking stand hippies, dude.
I know, man.
I can't stand them. It's like everything awful comes from them.
Yeah, and that's why I think the hippie movement in itself, we all know,
Right.
was a contrived psyop to manufacture culture, right? It was culture
Right.
creation from the intelligence agencies to compromise an entire generation of youth.
Right.
And that's really what happened. I mean, this applies to
100%.
our own parents, right? Like as far as just the generation, and my parents specifically grew up in that era, and
Yep.
we're very much flower children, in a way. My
Yeah.
dad wasn't quite as, heavily affected by, I guess, the more liberal form of the hippie movement, but he was drafted into Vietnam, man. It's like.
Right.
Could you imagine? And he told me once before, and I was just trying to conceptualize what that would have been like, and man, one day, and I think he was at the older age bracket, like 24 at the time,
Right.
and but still young enough, right, to easily be drafted. And I think the way he got like his draft card, and then you're all tuning in to find out who's actually going to be called, dude.
Yeah.
That's so dystopian to even imagine that
Yeah,
playing out,
dude.
right?
Basically
like,
just being told that you're going to go die in a foreign country,
Yeah.
you know?
And he said that he had a couple buddies, because this is the tail end of the war when he was drafted, right?
Right.
And he said a couple of his buddies who were older than him had served already, right? And they had gone to Vietnam, and come back, right? Luckily, at least two of his friends. And they sat him down and they told him when he got his draft card, they said, dude, do anything you can not to go. Right? They said, just do anything you can, man. He said, it doesn't make any fucking sense what's happening over there, right? Like, they're just sending us there to die, you know? And the fact that they're telling my dad that at the time is very interesting in itself. But to imagine one night you have a family, you have a job, or you have, you know, a woman you're potentially planning to marry, you have a job, you have a home, everything, right? Bills to pay. And all of a sudden overnight you're sent to basic training up in San Francisco and instantly you're in a barracks with bunk beds, you know, with a bunch of other dudes like you're in prison. And he said all you heard were grown-ass men just crying for their mommies and stuff, you know, like actually, right? And I'm like, I don't blame them.
Dude, I'd be doing the same shit.
Right.
Like,
and after basic, he's sent straight to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and to serve out his time during the, you know, the enlistment of the draft, basically. But very fascinating time to be alive, I would think. But anyway, that just occurred to me because I was reminded of that era in a real way, and even how they counteract.
It all goes back to that era. It's crazy.
It is.
I mean, that's, you know, the end of JFK. So that's the coup there. And then we're talking about Watergate and the coup with Nixon. And like the coup with Nixon, that was when like the CIA was like, we're here, we're queer, deal with it.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. It was the individual, right, who was sitting outside of the Watergate, right, who got the call, who was tipped off by his dual loyalty to intelligence at the time. Carl Schaffler, I think was his name. And what I found so fascinating, because during the Vietnam War, obviously, you had this anti-war movement at the time, very much fueled by that kind of hippie ideology in a way. And they were, I don't know if that was necessarily by design, right? But I will say that it fit the kind of playbook they were hoping to exploit, right? As far as easily dismissible, right? In terms of the individuals protesting, like, I mean, you're just basically drug addicts, you know, essentially, who, not to say that at the beginning of the Vietnam protests, it was altogether sort of like this youth movement that organically rose to the occasion and weren't entirely easily dismissible because they seemed to be clean cut in a way. And then all of a sudden the flower child ideology,
and the drugs come in.
Exactly.
And then it's been documented that was all on purpose, you know, to discredit the anti-war movement because it looked really bad for Nixon.
100%, man. And you know who was at the Vietnam protests in DC as an operational asset? Carl Schaffler. He was a member of the DC Metropolitan Police and also military intelligence loyalty as well. And turns out he was sent to the protests to legitimately hand out candy. But the candy was actually a poison pill. It was cyanide, and it would actually murder the individuals. Yes, they killed protesters, man, which is just imagining that not happening still to this day. I think we're naive if we legitimately believe they changed their approach and interesting to me. But anyway, enough about Vietnam, right?
It
has nothing to do. I guess it has nothing to do with the Satanic Panic, but still, it was a kind of.
I think it's set up a lot in the very beginning. You know, like culturally, that's in fact I cover that in my written article a little bit. Is because then we have like the launch of the feminist movement, and like we have all these things that are building blocks that are building to the 1980s, and that's part of it. It kind of built everyone ready to be panicked, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I do think there was definitely a psychological impact that, you know, was all pervasive and extended all throughout. Even into
trauma, dude.
Yeah. And even into the current moment, because these generations didn't heal from this strange sort of psychological trauma they endured.
Right. You're
Yeah.
right. What did they tell everyone after Vietnam is good luck, go start a family? You know, like that's just crazy to me, dude.
Hey, you
And
broke
then,
up for a second. You broke up for a second. You said,
am I
what did
good?
they tell everyone after? That's what I heard
Yeah,
first.
well,
Yeah.
yeah. What did they tell everyone after Vietnam is like, good luck, go start a fucking family, you know?
Right.
Who
You're
gives a
totally
shit
right.
if you're a vet and homeless? Like, and then like the people spraying Agent Orange and all the other agent colors, like they had to fight for benefit. Like, dude, there was mass trauma on the population, and the government did everything they possibly could to make sure that it was worse. So,
Right. 100%, man. And I think it is interesting to there's one last kind of note that I thought was of importance in terms of maybe even being able to identify a survivor or a victim of DID or this sort of level of monarch programming, right?
right,
And I think basically there are some physical identification characteristics that you can rely upon apparently to identify these victim survivors, and
right,
it often includes multiple electrical prod scarring as far as the scars involved. And basically, as a result, they develop moles on their skin, apparently. So, this is also a way in which, but a few had parts of their bodies mutilated by knives. Obviously, I mentioned Regina Louf, great example of that, unfortunately. Branding irons or needles,
right,
butterfly or occult tattoos are also very common.
right,
Now, Juliet Bryant sounds a lot more incredible,
right,
as far as, but man, when you think about how many people, especially women, that I see with butterfly tattoos, be careful. I know it's a beautiful, insect, right? And obviously, it's kind of fascinating, and I do think. As in terms of Mangala doing these esoteric artwork, right? Creating this like Gnostic art that portrayed the
yep,
crushing of the butterfly. That is fascinating. But what I found to be even more interesting is that apparently there's this belief that basically occult symbolism gives additional insight into essentially the psyche. The meaning psyche is the word for both soul and butterfly. Did you know this?
yeah,
This comes from the belief that human souls become butterflies while searching for a new reincarnation.
yeah,
So apparently, this is a part of the Gnostic belief system. I'm very novice as much as I do expose myself to this occult ideology, and I feel like so many of them are just they compare similar, right? As far as
right,
they definitely are easily, you can put them in parallel in a very simple way, right? And it seems to apply, but at the same time, I feel like it's just, I don't know. This is a fascinating concept in general. Is the main point, and just the notion of legitimately having these applications of what the butterfly, this layered symbolic meaning, and
right,
I doesn't necessarily apply in this exact and precise way in all throughout these various occult practices, right? Because clearly people tend to have their own unique style in which
right.
they exercise their beliefs in this context. But
Yeah,
anyway,
and that's the crazy thing about the occult, and why like some of it is just kind of pointless to look at, because there's a certain point, especially nowadays, like anyone can make anything, like the symbolism can mean anything to anyone, and so which is which is why I hate numerology, right?
mhm,
Like I can't stand that shit. It's because like I'm not doubting that certain numbers mean certain things to certain people,
right.
but it's just like it doesn't actually mean anything,
There's
It's
not a
just like
universal meaning that it always
right,
applies, right? Where it's
right,
like, as much as I do think that, what's it called? The occult art of, or occult philosophy of numerology.
hmm
What's the term? Damn it. Gematria or something, right?
yeah,
Isn't
yeah,
that the
yeah, yeah,
term? And I just think, yes, it applies, but
Right.
when and where you can decide. It's like
Yeah,
it's a very
exactly.
difficult task.
The only people that are going to know the answers to that are the people doing it, and
The
it's just
practitioners themselves, right?
right.
Yes.
Right. And so I think a lot of researchers that get into the weeds on some of that, it's like you guys are wasting your time because
Agreed.
it's like
Slippery
you
slope,
can
right?
guess. Right,
Mhm.
right. And that's, it's just watch out for that shit because that is in my opinion where it gets real schizo.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
you'll lose your damn mind if you
no
if you
kidding. It's like the
if-
number 23 or whatever with
Oh my God.
Jim Carrey, where he
Mhm.
goes nuts. Like, it's like, well, yeah, of course he went nuts.
Yeah, exactly. And it is fascinating though, because I do definitely believe the numerological component applies, but to
Oh,
what
yeah.
effect and when, it's a difficult thing, as we said. But
Right.
there's that clip that I had mentioned. It's basically in regard to an individual victim by the name of Kevin Collins, right? And
Right.
his name was Kevin Andrew Collins. This is the report from the official missing persons report, right? Last seen on the evening of February 10th. This is an unsolved cold case, by the way, right? Just keep that in mind. Kevin Andrew Collins was last seen on the evening of February 10th, 1984, sitting on a park bench at a bus stop in San Francisco, California. While waiting for the bus, which would take him home from basketball practice, witnesses report that a blonde man, described as being 6 foot tall and being in his 20s or 30s with a Great Dane by his side, talking to Kevin. Officials believe that Kevin may have been abducted by this individual along with another Caucasian man. Although this has not been confirmed by officials, witnesses reported that the individuals who may have abducted Kevin were driving a royal blue 4-door 1967 Ford Galaxy. So that's just sort of the introduction to the abduction of this unfortunate missing person report, Kevin Andrew Collins. It's again, if you consider the proximity of I believe Collins was born in San Francisco, as I mentioned, but to David and Ann Collins. These are apparently, a working class family with 9 children, mind you.
Damn.
I guess this was more maybe common at the time, but
Right.
he's a 4th grader at St. Agnes School. Wait for it. In the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. Oh no! What are we gonna do? What do we
Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck
Get
out of here.
the fuck out of here. Hey man, my dog's freaking out. Will you lock this down for a brief moment and I'll be right back?
Yeah.
I
Yeah, of
appreciate you,
course.
brother. Sorry.
So one thing I kind of wanted to bring up, let's see here. Let me get this pulled up real quick. So 1995 MK Ultra and false memory. Quote, so how does Project MK Ultra connect to the false memory propaganda campaign? One of the MK Ultra intelligence hacking experiments involved a honey trap strategy, whereby prostitutes were trained to extract information from intelligence officers using sex. Some of these sex workers were consenting adults. Others were sex trafficked children that MK Ultra researchers gained access to under the pretext of medical treatment. 2 women gave testimony about their experiences of sexual abuse at the hands of Martin Orne and other MK Ultra researchers at a 1995 hearing convened by President Bill Clinton's Presidential Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments. The testimony given by Claudia Mullen and Christine DiNicola was filmed and is viewable on YouTube itself. So make sure and go check those out if you've never seen those interviews. Those are crazy. I was just talking about the Claudia Mullen and Christine DiNicola. I believe is how you pronounce her last name. The testimony given, 1995 testimony given by those 2 women at the hearings of the Presidential Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments.
Oh yeah, man.
Like,
Pretty sure that's where Claudia made the the statement, right, that I had referenced in the past about who was it? The individual, Frank Church. That was who it was,
Right.
right? Who was basically sexually blackmailed by the Alan Dulles usual suspect old boys network, right? I'm like, oh my God.
Fuck those guys so hard. Seriously, fuck the Dulles brothers. Like
Mhm.
some of the worst things to ever happen to this country.
Yep. 100%, man. It's just I'm never at this point kind of shocked by the level of compromise, human compromise, I guess is the way it's been put, but
Dude, I just
involved.
don't understand why these people don't just come out,
Right.
because then the blackmail doesn't matter anymore.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
is everyone that morally and ethically compromised that they can't just be like, look, I fucked up, right?
Right.
Like, I understand this is the end of my career, but this is what's right. Like, nobody is going to do that.
Mhm.
All right, get the fuck out of here.
Right. Exactly. And I think oh, whoops. I accidentally just opened up I gotta close this real quick. There we go. Anyway. Yeah, I did think just in terms of the Claudia Mullen, yeah, everyone needs to go read through or at the very least expose themselves to the
Yeah.
testimony that you were just mentioning. Because my God, man, sinister
Yeah, it's
subproject
wild.
involving child prostitutes is human honeypots, right? Like this is
Right.
this is the unfortunate reality we're in. I mean, dear
Right.
God.
Dude, that's what I think Erica Kirk is.
Yeah. Oh my
Like
God. You saw
100%.
that? She goes on like she's trying to look like Tyler Robinson, man. You saw she's in all
Yeah,
black,
dude. Yeah.
black hat.
Did you see
so
she's now stepping away? Like she's
No.
now like, yeah, alleged the reports are that she's like stepping away to go spend time with family now.
interesting.
Yeah. It's like, why now? Why?
Yeah.
Because people have stopped showing up to your fucking events because nobody wants to go to your event, even with a free ticket.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, that's insane to me. I think
Right.
yeah, obviously just in terms of the Turning Point USA, TPUSA sex crimes, and I do believe that
Yeah.
the Romanian modeling agency was involved in child sex trafficking.
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah, to imagine a world where that wasn't covered up in very convenient fashion is being naive and vulnerable psychologically,
Yep.
in my opinion. And
100%.
it's great to have heroes, I guess, but you're making a huge mistake. And I think that the more you prop up individuals on a platform or a
Yep.
pedestal in your own mind, the more likely you are to be controlled and kind of led into the worst form of ideas connecting into your ideology. But yeah, it was not only Claudia Mullen, it was Carol Rutz as well, right?
Yes.
Because, yeah,
Yep.
dude, that was fascinating. And I think it was
Some brave women, dude. Some brave women to
100%.
get up in front of all of those people and put that down on video.
name names,
Yeah.
it was like incredible to witness. And I think it was, yeah, Sidney Gottlieb was directly who Carol Rutz was basically delivered to.
Yep.
And she had been sexually abused by her father and grandfather, so it was her, Carol Rutz, not Claudia Mullen, technically, but it still applies. And she had already developed an alter personality named Little Girl to endure the torment, apparently. Her mother had given birth to 8 children and was even institutionalized twice after trying to run away from her husband. So you can tell that this was obviously an arranged operation of some
Yeah.
kind, and this woman was more than likely an abused victim. And I don't know how much the mother was more concerned with her own welfare than she was all these children she was giving birth to. Probably not with her own consent, I would imagine.
Yeah. I would imagine not consensually.
Right. And if you remember the what was it, as far as Michael Aquino's The Star Chamber, right? The White Eagle
Mhm.
Underground and the Star Chamber. If you remember, what was Paul Schultz, right? His wife was basically involved in a Nazi breeding experiment, right? And the purpose was to have these children as vulnerable assets that they could utilize at any moment for this reason and level of abuse. And I think it was basically the CIA was they had arranged access to Carol Rutz by blackmailing her grandfather, who had been a producer of child pornography, along with one of her uncles. So this a family business, right?
Right.
Her grandfather was also apparently paid a large sum of money on different occasions, by Gottlieb and these individual suspects that all these allegations are surrounding. And apparently, she was taken by plane to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base or Air Base, the Montreal Neurological Institute, and luxurious private estates for abuse. Yes. And Claudia Mullen
course.
related how she was used as a sexual toy in blackmail schemes targeting military officers, doctors with ethical squeamishness, and elected officials, anyone who might possibly stop the seemingly unlimited flow of tax dollars to these projects. That's basically the concept. And she testified, I think it was 57 and 58, right? During that time period where she claims as a victim of sexual abuse, she's brought to Sidney Gottlieb's inner circle, the CIA inner circle, by leadership at Tulane University in New Orleans. Uh-oh. It looks like we have a connection back into not only Lee Harvey Oswald getting a strange job at Tulane University Hospital, one of the hospitals associated with the MK Ultra experimentation, going through Tulane University at the time. Oh man, this just all overlaps. It's too much to.
I mean, if there's a connection to Louisiana, I would start wondering, like, is there a connection to the process? You know,
that's exactly what I think. You know,
like that's what I would start asking questions about.
After, Jimmy Boots, Detective James Rothstein, he has a very interesting statement on Jacob Wetterling, by the way, who plays into this paperboy fetish and these abductions that were playing out in terms of that individual I mentioned earlier by the name of Kevin Collins, right? So they're claiming Kevin Collins, Johnny Gosch, Jacob Wetterling, all these boys were a part of the same ordering process going through Michael Aquino for a specific perpetrator in the network who had a paperboy fetish. So that was apparently what they were trying to, basically,
God, it makes so much sense.
Right?
You know?
Yeah.
It just works.
It does. And when you see, I think it was, she said that a number of doctors like basically tested her and the way she responded sexually, how obedient she was, how much pain she could endure, and many different other things. But it was in 59 that this group apparently, so that's whenever the trauma was taking place, was that time period, 57 through 58. And she testified after that fact. I think it was almost 10 years later, maybe less than that. I'm not entirely certain the exact date. Did you say it earlier? Because I can't remember.
So, I mean, these testimonies came out, 95.
Okay, so it was quite some time later before it was ever made public. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
That makes sense.
So this was the Bill Clinton's Presidential Advisory Committee on Human Radiation Experiments.
Interesting. All right. Well, you see why disclosure happens.
The document is like 1,000 pages, so it's a hefty fucking document, but all of their testimonies in there.
Right.
So, and there's two documents, I believe, one that literally covers all the radiation stuff, because I mean, they were injecting people with radiation just to see what it did. Right. And then there's also the mind control and Project Monarch side of everything, MK Ultra, false memory syndrome stuff. Like, there's everything that's in there, and there's two documents, and it's split up. Both of them are like 1,000 pages each. And there's a video of Bill Clinton holding one of the documents. Dude, it's like that fucking thick. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think that they essentially dragged their feet in terms of the disclosure for so long that it never really matters as far as the end result.
They had to wait till most people were dead or most people were dying, basically so nobody could get in trouble for it.
Exactly. And I think the only way it actually applies as far as, constructive accountability is our being able to just identify the practices and the
Right.
evidence that proves out the fact that this is a common technique and playbook that they have been operating under for generations, right? And
Right.
in no way, again, do I think this ended after the church committee hearings.
No.
Yeah,
No.
you know.
No. It just, you know, the only thing that happened is they renamed it. It went further underground. They applied better camouflage. They're not going to stop this shit. They
No.
already started it and were doing it for 20 years before like the public. And the fact that the public found out was a complete fluke, you know,
Mhm.
complete fluke. And it was literally just like a bookkeeping error, you know,
So funny. Yeah, I think it
like,
was actually what's his name? It was whenever I forget the name of the author now. I'll pull it here in a moment because it's fascinating. And basically John Marks, I think it was.
yeah, John D. Marks. Yep.
Yeah.
He's the
Yeah.
one that got 139 boxes of MK Ultra financial
Mhm.
records.
This is such a crazy story too because it was basically, I think, 35 years. Over the course of 35 years, he had essentially been attempting to get his hands on
Yeah.
many different documents, and how the CIA hid their MK Ultra mind control program
Yep.
is actually an amazing piece that everyone
Dude,
should try.
I
and
want to
explore.
I want to get him on my show so bad.
Right,
Like,
that would be so
I would
cool.
love to speak to him.
Hmm. So there's a story that he begins with that I found. I think I put it in my James Holmes episode, right? Because it was just like, I felt like to begin with this kind of staging the foundation of how heavily influenced, just society at large has become in terms of the level of MK Ultra and mind control operations conducted,
Right.
covertly, of course. But it's emblematic of this level of psychological control over the masses that I think is truly, in essence, the mind war and the psychology of victory
Right.
that right we can all harken back to in a way. But yeah, it was Search for the Manchurian Candidate. That
Yep.
was essentially the book, right? I
Yeah,
think
that was like the first introduction and one of the most raw forms of like the MK Ultra documents and basically what they did. So yeah, that was the first compiled like account of all of these experiments.
sub projects. He basically discusses. He told John Rappaport, right, who wrote an article on this as well. And I remember John Marks basically told him that essentially he had originally filed these Freedom of Information Act requests for documents connected to the CIA's MK Ultra program and got nothing back, right? And obviously, through his work, he's fully exposed the existence and range in many ways of these sub projects associated. And so finally, he gets nothing back from his FOIA requests, right? And finally, as he says, as if to play a joke on him, someone at the CIA sent John Marks 10 boxes of financial and accounting records. So John Marks says the attitude was, here, see what you can do with this.
Yeah.
He said, basically, they're very boring, right? The vast majority of those documents that were, as far as the reading. And so Marks goes through all of them. And lo and behold, he finds he found he could basically piece together these various projects based on the funding data.
Yep.
And so he assembles all of this information and starts naming names. Basically, he conducts many different interviews, and this is what provided his research, right, for the Search for the Manchurian Candidate. And so he told Rappaport that 3 important books had been written about MK Ultra, and I appreciated this because all of the books he references are tomes and key, priorities if you want to expose yourself to much of the prominent evidence that's been substantiated over the course of these FOIA requests being, in many ways reinforced. But it all stemmed from basically those 10 boxes of CIA financial records.
Yep.
And so Operation Mind Control by Walter Bauer, obviously he had mentioned his own book as well. And then The Mind Manipulators by Alan Shefflin and Edward Opton. And so
all three great books.
I do. I think they're fascinating, and they're key again in understanding really the core foundational purpose in many ways of what was the clandestine MK Ultra operation. But
Right.
he said a CIA official told him in 1962, after 10 years of mind control experiments, the whole program had been shifted over to another internal CIA department, the ORD, right? The Office of Research and Development. The ORD had 100 boxes of information on their MK Ultra work. There was no way, right, that they would basically, at least Mark says, there was no way under the sun he was ever going to get his hands on any of these documents. So it didn't matter how many FOIA requests he was going to file. He viewed it as basically it's all over. He's done. The door's shut. And the CIA basically goes as clandestine and covert as possible, more so than ever before. And we're talking very little leaks that you can point to at the time, because I think a lot of the documentation was ordered to be destroyed by Richard Helms, if you remember.
Right.
And
they knew this was coming. They knew from the accounts that I've been able to track down is they knew something was coming. They didn't know what, but they knew something big was coming. And so they started just burning shit.
Of course, man. And I just always assumed it had to have been the most incriminating portions of the evidence,
Yeah. Oh yeah, dude.
Right.
Dude, it was exactly like how far the experimentation went. It was exactly what the experimentation was and what they found out from the experimentation.
Right. That's exactly what it was, in my opinion. And I think
because and the excuse, because if it was ever found, it would embarrass the agency.
Exactly.
Get the fuck out of here, because if it was ever found, you guys would be spending the rest of your life in prison. Like
100%.
that's why.
That is exactly why. And I do believe that the vast majority of these cases of prominence that were really, I think, at the very least focused on and resonated with many people who at the time especially, but never have been solved, as we consistently see. And these cold cases, I think, in many ways, it's up to the podcast community who's objectively pursuing the truth to actually sift through the layers of deception involved in covering up these cases, because that is where we can kind of prove out this interesting pattern recognition playbook that has consumed our lives, as far as being equipped with the tools in order to actually see these things for what they are in the moment, right? And so anyway, I thought that Haight-Ashbury connection to Kevin Collins' disappearance and abduction is insane.
Dude, that's wild. That's wild, but it makes sense.
I know,
because
dude.
because San Francisco has always been a hotbed,
Exactly.
always has been.
Look at this guy who was outside of Bohemian Grove, and he gives Peter Chernoff is his name, and he gives this interesting statement that applies to so many of the cases that I've covered and you have covered as well in the past, and it's unsettling.
Come in here for a second. Close up. You witnessed the sacrifice of an individual in a satanic ritual at the Bohemian Grove. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that was Kevin Collins. And I've also made this very public that I was one of 3 or 4 people that kidnapped him off the streets of San Francisco.
What the fuck, dude?
Kevin Collins was chosen by Michael Aquino, and because he was a Catholic young virgin boy. And he was, I named you the names of who was all involved. These were all people that were somewhat unknown, at least in the major public at that time.
So they are guilty as hell. Is that correct?
They are as guilty as most people in the world are of murder. I am one of 3 people that has publicly acknowledged being involved in ritualistic murder of children up in Bohemian Grove. Paul Bonacci being one of Nebraska, which you can read Senator John DeCamp's Franklin cover-up. It's online. And the second one is David Scherter.
Interesting, right?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So that was something that I had never seen. And
Yeah.
until this listener of the show actually sent it to me, I think, like I said, yesterday it was. And my God, I just said thank you so much for sending this to me. Obviously,
Yeah.
this is absolutely insane, and there's no way, obviously, that I couldn't touch on this at a certain level. But I did think it was interesting that he mentions David Scherter, right?
Right.
Because again, this is that strange Franklin victim that we had discussed on Operation GCD the other day, and so I go back through that book that they showed at the end that was David Scherter's own
Yep.
personal book called Rabbit Hole, a satanic ritual abuse survivor story. And man, the Confessions of an Antichrist is what it legitimately says, which is absolutely absurd, but
Right.
maybe not so much whenever you read through his actual allegations. Now, keep in mind, if you recall Paul Bonacci, what did he claim? He says he had altars programmed within his subconscious mind that would essentially help discredit him in the eyes of the authorities if he ever were to go off the reservation, so to speak, and began naming names and explaining the operation.
Self-destructive altars, right?
Exactly.
And there's levels to it also. So, like that, they'll be able to discredit themselves, or like if they go down far enough, delete themselves. So
I think
like-
suicidal altars as well is what he was claiming. He said he stopped answering the phone, right? Because he thought he never knew when the code phrase, the trigger word would be uttered, and he would just
and that's the thing is that
programming.
these triggers, they can literally be a phrase, they can be a tone, like, so you could pick up the phone and you just hear like a jingle, and all of a sudden, boom, you're flipped.
Exactly.
Like this is what we see in the Manchurian Candidate, the movie, and like, dude, that movie is so amazing. I highly recommend anyone go watch it because it's so telling.
I love it so much. Angela Lansbury, it's my favorite character she's ever played. As terrible.
I agree.
Yeah, she is just like, talk about a kind of what's it called? Oedipus complex, right? Where it's like, and that's involved in so many of these cases of abuse. Regina Louf was taught how to sexually pleasure her grandmother, who ran a brothel in Nazi Germany before relocating to Belgium.
Right.
When she was like 3 years old. She was groomed and trained in how to do this, and her own grandmother, and the fact that she ran a brothel in Nazi Germany in the first place, that apparently had multiple layers to the operation, where she had one brothel that was only for the enlisted men, and the other brothel was for the officers in the Nazi party. Yeah,
right.
And so
probably cleanliness of the girls, probably like all sorts of different weird shit too. And you know how like repressed and weird the Germans get, like there's some weird underground shit. So
you saw what was it? King Charles, right? You saw that hilarious. I think we talked about it privately after the show on Already Dead the other day, right? The Trump and King Charles being 15th cousins. And what you just mentioned, Germany, right? It seems like they both were descending from a 15th century German, which is hilarious. And as much as I think this might not be as as kind of important and valuable as we might think from the outside looking in, because if you look at what 15th cousins actually are, and what they kind of reference in terms of like the DNA being very much negligible in a certain sense as far as how distant the 15th cousin truly is. I think they claimed like this 15 generations ago is roughly 400 to 500 years, this common ancestor, 15th cousins that they share. And so apparently it's less than 0.001%. You have basically more in common.
That's like statistically insignificant.
Exactly. That's the point. And basically they I think this was a, hold on. I can't remember the actual publication that this came from, but it was basically the report that Polymarket used, claiming they were 15th
Right.
cousins, and it said you have more in common genetically with a random stranger than 15th cousins do. So
Right.
it is meaningless. But I did think the German descent was somewhat interesting, as much as this might
Right.
not be, it could just be
Yeah, it's not quite a smoking
non-starter.
gun, but it
Mhm.
does kind of put things into perspective, kind of brings things back to that old world history,
Mhm.
and how things are kind of playing out on the modern stage. It's very
Exactly.
interesting because it appears as though that the Germans are being suppressed, for a
Mhm.
reason. So
I
there
agree.
there's a lot of there's a lot of old world history that would point to the Germans being suppressed at a certain point,
Right.
basically to stop them from rising up and taking over the world.
Yeah.
At least
Basically.
according to what some of these people would say. So
Mhm. Yeah, it could very well be this sort of manufactured threat in a certain sense that
right,
helped keep the average German citizen in poverty for far too long, and who knows? It did seemingly help play into the restructuring of the world stage in general,
right,
geographically speaking, and the levels of power where they kind of relocated. But that individual, though, right? David Schroeder that I mentioned,
right,
that we kind of called into question on JJ's show, because it does seem absolutely absurd. Some of the extraordinary levels of allegations he's coming forward with.
right.
It's hard to take each of them seriously, especially at face value. Um, and so many of these
Extraordinary
people.
claims require extraordinary evidence.
Exactly. And but all the while, it's always important to be aware as far
Right,
as much as you can be of the different layers of allegations and claims that have been made, and potentially how they could apply and relate to the case at hand, I guess. But
right,
it was specifically in his book that I was reading through, David Schroeder, that it caught my attention, as much as this could be even a consequence of his programming and trauma and abuse as a child. If all of this is as true as it seems, then he could still very much just be going through the motions and providing a almost something in terms of relevance to the network, as far as just being able to strategically undermine, again, the credibility of so many of the victims that this case relates to.
right,
So it could be that, right, strategy at hand in a way, or we should take this seriously. Not entirely certain which one it is, but he claims that his father was a violent man, abusive in every way. In his younger years, he basically was a wannabe gangster. He's a gambler, an alcoholic, womanizer, and basically abused his own children and others. And he says his own mother was a narcissistic drunk who was aggressive when victimizing. Promiscuous and selfish and utmost hand wringer, she goaded my father until they became physical with each other. Both were intelligent and physically attractive, and neither had a problem with what was occurring in our family, as both financially benefited from selling their children for sex. For a long time, I just figured that my parents' friends were a bunch of sick, rich pedophiles enamored of the 1960s and 70s cinema genre of witchcraft and the devil, like Vincent Price movies or Creature Feature featuring Rosemary's Baby. Drunk, drugged out narcissists paying my parents to do what they wanted with my older siblings and me. I figured the satanic stuff was just one step beyond hedonism, and that my father, in his high priest red robes signifying blood sacrifice, would be the fall guy if the group were exposed. The fact that both of my parents participated in orgies involving children was sickening but not surprising. But Satanism is far more than a movie set. Practicing the black arts, whether intentionally or not, leads to what leads to what lives within the shadows. and you never know what you're going to attract by dabbling in such things. I mean, that's a poignant way to illustrate, right?
Yeah.
How this, yeah. Having experienced it directly, I am one who believes that some doors are meant to remain shut, but fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And if anything was true about my father, it was that he was a fool. My siblings and I always believed that a demon lived inside my father as a result of his practices with the dark arts. Whatever it wasn't him. When engraved, he became someone else, his gray eyes going cold like a dead fish, and then his atrocities knew no bounds. Children are intuitive, and considering my parents' social activities, it wasn't a difficult conclusion to come to. My father was very proud of being a generational Satanist of a bloodline coven of witches. Realized through their associations with a group called the Colonial Dames. Write this down, dude. Like, honestly, like, right? Like, that's how I felt. Our family discovered we were first in power in the 13 colonies, first to arrive in America, and distantly related to Beethoven. Yeah.
Weird.
Hey, yeah, we have another strange reference to, yeah, it seems like there is a German death cult that exists as well, right? That we should obviously take seriously.
Right. And
No.
that's funny, just real quick.
Go ahead.
A book I've been reading about one of the people who would teach law enforcement officers like during the 1980 Satanic Panic. In fact, let's see, I don't think I have it in here. But it was very interesting. He ran into a kid who was part of a German death cult, and the guy who trained him was an SS officer and left him his SS uniform.
Oh my God.
And the kid brought the uniform to the meeting to show that this guy, and translated German to English like it was nothing. So,
you know what that makes me think of is the psychopath machine, right? Because Steve Smith claimed the basically the German death cult was the German Brotherhood of Death, I believe is what he called them.
Right.
And he essentially stayed in the home of one of these former SS officers, he claimed, who had relocated under paperclip to Montreal, Canada. And yes,
of course.
and all of a sudden they had a direct pipeline into utilizing Oak Ridge, the very facility that Steve Smith and all of these psychopathic murderers and sociopaths were sent to, with no sort of a window of like, hey, you're serving this amount of time. No, it was unended. They had no idea what sentence they had. It was until they were essentially released by the individuals running the facility, and they were releasing convicted murderers, serial killers, child rapists, who were then basically proceeding from the Oak Ridge facility after experimenting upon them with behavioral modification techniques. And then they showed up on the front lines in these, international conflicts, essentially fighting with the IDF at one point. I remember was Peter Woodcock, I think, was the individual who did this. It's so crazy. So that's all I thought of was the German Brotherhood of Death, or something, I think was the name of the cult that he referenced, who would come in and visit with these patients at Oak Ridge. And that's how he first met them, and inevitably had a place to stay when he left. And by the way, he has a strange story. He goes on this weird odyssey all around the world in these South American countries that seem to have a direct line into intelligence activities at the time. And
interesting, just just a coincidence, just traveling to these same countries where there's a whole bunch of fucking spooks.
Exactly. And I feel like what I remember what he had explained in his book, The Psychopath Machine, is that while he was staying there, he saw the Nazi SS uniform that was genuine in the closet of the individual, the old man who owned the property that he was staying at. And there was one night he showed up late, went in through the back door, and the wife was always very kind to him. They were kind of old school and sort of traditional values in a way, I guess, right? That he saw at surface level. And then basically there were multiple children, young children, kind of preteen in a way,
Right.
at this property, at this home of this individual former SS officer, apparently, at the very least, had this uniform, and claims that they were hosting an initiation ceremony, and that basically they had the kids stand up on the table in the front room while this was all being conducted, and they were reading from this ancient text, this grimoire. This is something that
Right.
they very much deemed valuable for this purpose, and yeah, they proceeded to kind of sexually grope, one of the girls who was there, young girls, as a part of this initiation ceremony. And so, anyway, that's a whole brief aside, but it applies, right? Because clearly you have these strange kind of geographical examples of what seem to be Nazi safe havens post-war, and
Right.
propped up and protected, in many ways, and linked directly into the intelligence projects of the time as well. And not surprised. But anyway, I'm
Surprised
I'm
at all
almo-
either.
right. I'm almost finished with this fascinating story in regard to Schurter, because it's just the way in which this could effectively, layer in to not only the finders, Franklin, Confessions of a DC Madam, Craig Spence, right? His operation. I mean, all of these operations are fundamentally, you have one specific individual other than Michael Aquino, and that kind of connects them all together, and that's Paul Benassi, right? This child victim who we've relied on so very often for just extraordinary allegations.
Well, and Paul Benassi goes back to John Wayne Gacy, who goes back
100%.
to David Norman, who goes back to Philip Paskey, and
Which all
honestly,
connect to Dean Coral.
I think I think that's the key right there. Honestly, I really do. And like the 33 boys with Gacy, what the fuck, dude? Like, get out of here.
Ridiculous.
And like I genuinely do believe that Philip Paskey is the key to most of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because he's another Paul Benassi, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
And because think about it, like the Delta Project, was meant to set up homes for boys to go to and basically be slaves at. So was John Wayne Gacy's house one of these hubs?
That's what the claim is. That's
right.
the reason why I think they even used his properties to get rid of many of the bodies,
Right.
and
Because some of these boys were obviously going to die.
exactly.
And they knew this ahead of time. So
Yeah. I mean, if you consider Dean Coral as a member of the network, which he very much was, and that's what exposed John David Norman and the pink index cards and all the
over
sexual
10,000 pink index cards that were destroyed by the Department of Justice, right?
Yeah, dude.
And there were prominent individuals. There were musicians, actors, politicians. There were tons of people. Yeah, athletes.
Man.
Like it's like Epstein before Epstein.
Yeah. And also reminds me of Heidi Reichen in the White House call girl, because same thing. She was in Dallas leading up to the JFK assassination. What?
Right.
And she's in Dallas and she already has a black book of sexual blackmail on all these prominent figures. Are you kidding me? We're talking massive business moguls of industry, and not only that, owners of national, NFL football teams, right, and things of that nature.
Yep.
It's too much, man. And again, all of this there's a reason that's basically the sentiment, and I've said this a few different times throughout our show so far, is because it feels undeniable by now, right? That these are overlapping. That this is one large perverse network that leads into the other, as I've said before. And
yeah, dude, it's like tentacles. Like there's one big one, and there might be offshoots, but it's all part of the same network.
Exactly, man. It's disturbing as hell, honestly.
Yeah, dude. Honestly, and this is what's frustrating, because people out there still deny that this exists. And it's like, dude, you don't even know. You just don't even know. Like, you've never looked at anything, and the fact that you can still deny it tells me it's just that you have never looked at a single document, you've never read a single book, you've never talked to a single survivor, nothing.
Dude,
and so you're not an authority on this, so shut your mouth.
please, by all means. And that's a conversation I legitimately just had with my wife the other night. I picked her up from work. We're heading home, and basically this guy in a massive truck in Los Angeles in the first place, decides to turn wide out of his turning lane to take a left turn into the left lane of moving traffic, which I am in, to basically force me to swerve into the lane next to me. And it sends me into a monologue of how much I despise. So, essentially the psychological starting point of what seems to be the general public in many ways. Not to say that I'm let's just say in any way putting myself on some kind of pedestal in terms of my intellect or anything. I'm just considering the notion of how many people are so convinced and confident in conviction. We're talking, they are convicted in the fact that they have a legitimate opinion on something, but yet have done zero legwork to expose themselves to any kind of reinforcing evidence of substantiation that they can point to provide, a fundamental framework for their ideas in the first place. And they're very much just reciting and parroting the latest TikTok trend or whatever the hell they saw on their algorithm that crossed their path and has now become, their official conviction in terms of their opinion on this matter.
They're basically macaws, just like repeating shit that they saw somewhere else. That it's not even really their opinion. They might agree with it, but it's not their genuine opinion, and they've never really tested it.
They're overconfident in this, and it's the way that they kind of present it as well, as if this is just the bottom line, the facts of life. And to see the level of confidence in the average person as far as just any type of perspective that, in terms of a conversation, it's just, it's fascinating to realize that, the less you know, the more you think you know, right? And it's like the more you begin to expose yourself, and it really does have this kind of shocking impact that kind of bleeds out into every other aspect of your life. And I think you begin to take a brief moment to reflect on your ideas before you become so overconfident and feel as if this. But anyway, this is just kind of like a personal aside, because it does frustrate me, obviously. And
no, I'm with you on that, and I've actually kind of got a note for that. So once you're done with that story, I can actually kind of break into like the psychology behind some of this. So
let's do it, brother. So obviously the familial type of genealogical just evidence, so that he's relying upon to claim that they date back as far as his family genetics to the 13 colonies in Beethoven. Definitely
JJ in the chat said one of the first families in the 13 colonies sounds like Society of Cincinnati.
There we go.
Right.
It's always a matter of time before the Society of the Cincinnati or even the Pilgrim Society and the Anglo-American establishment, which I think are just kind of like versions of each other in a way, because
it's like Freemasons and Oddfellows or whatever.
It really does seem that way, right? But anyway, he basically says during his teen years, this is David Schurter again in his book, I pointed out to my father that if we were the first to arrive in America, then that meant we were the worst, because back then being sent to the New World was like a death sentence. I thought that was a great perspective on the original colonizers, because, as much as I feel as if, the narrative has obviously been embraced by the just recorded history, as they are fleeing from religious persecution to found the new city upon a hill, the new Atlantis, right? When that in itself is a cult in general, as far as the framework of it. it's just a laughable, cartoonish narrative in my mind at this point, and I feel like that is the vast majority of recorded history, and people unfortunately embrace these again, like, it's a fantasy world at a certain level when you legitimately believe the foundational narrative applied to America in itself. You know, it's just there's no way in hell if you pierce below the surface for any amount of time in regard to any historical event whatsoever, you instantly realize that it's never what it seems. And the
Right.
official version and motivation and inspiration behind the conflict, or whatever the case may be, is always far less plausible than the alternative narratives attached to it, right? And so, anyway, the death sentence, obviously, you know, it does seem like maybe these were just sick occultist pedophiles who were sent over here, like, get rid of these guys, like,
Yeah.
we go sacrifice children somewhere else, you know?
Right.
You never know. But anyway, it said whether generational or due to my parents' activities when they were young, the fact was that something indwelled my father. Perhaps ritual blood sacrifices opened him up to being inhabited by something unnatural. In the Nietzschean sense of if you look into the void looks back into you. But my father and his friends did more than look into the void. And in turn, we all got more than we bargained for. From conception on, I was always considered the family bad seed. The night I was conceived, my mother had been 3 months or so out of the hospital after a terrible car accident in which both of her kneecaps were ripped off, bones broke, and she experienced a serious head injury. She'd actually been considered dead for half an hour until she began moaning. Anyway, that night, she and my father got into an argument. None of my 3 older siblings, the youngest of whom is 12 years older than me, remember what the argument was about, but they do remember that it became violent and that my father ended up raping my mom in front of them. When she discovered she was pregnant, my father told the family and neighborhood that he couldn't be the father because of a supposed vasectomy. Later, with another wife, he would conceive 2 more children. So my mother was ostracized from family, friends, and neighborhood, and I began life as the bastard child of rape. As if that wasn't enough, the family doctor told her I was a tubular pregnancy and that she should abort me before I broke through and both of us bled to death. Despite the pain she was in, she refused. Her excuse was that she was too busy, but later in life she told me she was hoping to die in order to get away from my father. Then one morning she awoke and the pain was gone. I was one of 100,000 babies that found its way into the womb. For this reason, my mother felt I was some sort of miracle. She went into labor on Thanksgiving night, and I wasn't born until, are you ready? December 6th, 1966 at 6 a.m. And to say it was a
What the
complicated
fuck?
right. And to say it was a complicated birth is an understatement. I was breached with my hands behind my head. As I came out, the resulting pressure on my mother caused her to have a stroke and die for 6 minutes. So you can see why my birth deeply affected my self-conception. My mother may not have been a jackal, as in The Omen, but my conception and birth always made me feel like some sort of weird version of it, just without the special powers. As far back as I can remember, I feared waking up and being, if not the Antichrist, then an Antichrist. This may sound crazy, but given the family I was born into, it isn't so hard to understand. I never wanted to be the Antichrist, but I feared that the thing living in my father would someday live in me and that I would somehow become like him. It wasn't just that I was born into a family of sociopaths, nor was it just being sold to a bunch of pedophile Satanists that caused this fear. It originated at birth. And this is basically the last point that I thought was worth covering in the show today. But because of this fear, I have always had an unusual relationship with God. As a child, I read everything I could about God and the devil to find some way out of what I considered my fate. I read the Bible from front to back numerous times. I studied Eastern religions, Greek mythology, and any occult book I could lay my hands on. I believed myself to be in hell. and was desperate to get out. I tried to kill myself several times. Once, when I ended up in the hospital as a teenager, my father asked me why. My father asked me why I didn't just jump in front of a train. That is the kind of advice you offer a bad seed, I guess.
Go
Right?
fuck yourself, Dad.
Talk about the ultimate daddy issues.
No
Yeah.
kidding. Holy shit.
Right.
Oh,
That made me now, obviously, this could be, as I said before, strategically undermining credibility of past victims who this would apply directly to. But it's very difficult not to consider this as potentially being possible, especially just
Right.
looking into, his parents are legitimately pedophiles, and
right.
I think what's so insane in as far as the connections to his father, I believe his father was Robert Lynn Schurter Jr. and his stepmother was Joanne C. Schurter. And he talks about how basically this is David Schurter, right? The individual victim that I've been reciting from his book, basically. Well,
And
there's an
what
addition.
book was that?
Okay, yeah. That book is titled, I think I mentioned it earlier, but it's called Rabbit Hole, a Satanic Ritual Abuse Survivor Story by David Schurter. And there's a chapter in it called Confessions of an Antichrist, and it's insane. But anyway,
I mean, within all fairness,
Mhm.
this now whether I would say as somebody who like studies this and researches this, I would say even if this didn't happen to him, this has happened to somebody.
Exactly.
This is somebody's story. Now I believe it. Like this is possible. Like it's beyond possible, right? Like this is pretty standard for a lot of these multi-generational satanic families. Like this is not out of the realm of what's normal for them. So,
Exactly.
I mean, this is kind of like with the Kathy O'Brien stuff. It's like the other stories lend credence to this story,
Absolutely, man. And it's really the genealogical application to the cult, right? The satanic practices of this strange level of ritualistic abuse,
Right.
and if it legitimately does date back in this way, then what we were discussing the other day on the maiden tribute of modern Babylon and the French aristocracy of the time,
Right.
obviously not only isolated to French aristocracy. I believe this was all throughout the UK. I mean, there's many different
Oh,
reference
yeah.
points. I mean, geographically speaking, this is not one case isolated in its own right.
No. No.
I think that I really do believe that it was a sort of Rosicrucian mission to found America, and in some certain sense, these sadistic, sinister levels of abuse were tied to this really theological occult ideology of that is clearly kind of all pervasive throughout this level of the power cabal. And it seems like this it's almost a window into this unelected bureaucracy that has fundamentally structured society in its modern form, and especially in the West. And these are ancient pagan, they are essentially, these ideologies predate ancient Babylon. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes so far back into ancient human history that it almost is just inherently a part of us, as far as this evil satanic form of exploiting the most vulnerable.
Right.
And that's hard to
It's
even
almost
think
like
through.
evil actually exists.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Imagine that. Like,
Mhm.
and
Hey,
here's
that-
the conclusion I came to, which is why I left Satanism, because I came face to face with evil, right?
Mhm.
And if evil exists, then God has to exist.
Right.
Like, it's
Isn't
just
that the
logic.
best quote, right? Like the best trick
Yeah.
the devil ever pulled was convincing the vast majority that he doesn't exist, or something like that.
Right. Yeah. And it's like once you know evil exists, once you see it like in human form, once it happens in front of you, then like what? You got a choice.
Right.
You got a choice. You can go good or you can go evil. You can either go into it or you can get the fuck out of it. So I mean,
man, tell me what notes you had to reference, honestly,
Yeah.
because we can get into after that for at least a brief moment. There's an additional layer to David Schroeder allegations that draws in the paperboy fetish, my friend. And yeah, something I definitely was not expecting and fell into my lap in the worst possible way, I guess you could say. But
So the one thing I wanted to bring up is the psychology of the witch hunt. Okay. I think we all know what the witch hunt is. But just for those who might not, it is in the context of the Satanic Panic. This is a rhetorical device is basically how I refer to it. And
yeah,
it's
I'm listening,
it's,
Jacob. I'm getting
yeah.
more water, but I'm listening. I
Word.
can hear you still. I'll be right back.
So I phrase this as a rhetorical device, and it's proven very effective. And it's the phrase witch hunt, 2 words, basically 2 words that when deployed at the right moment and repeated often enough could reframe an entire national conversation, which is exactly what happened during the 1980s and 1990s in the United States. During the Satanic Panic, collective hysteria, which in my opinion, there was a reason to be hysterical. So this is what I'm talking about when I say the psychology of the witch hunt. So the reason the witch hunt narrative works so effectively, and just so everyone knows, this is actually this is a peek into a project that I'm working on. This is something I'm getting ready to release here soon, because I'm always wanting to arm people with the best knowledge to be able to fight this Satanic Panic. Like, oh, there were no Satanists doing this stuff. Like, Satanists don't hurt children or whatever. That's bullshit. So I'm trying to arm people with the best knowledge possible. And so this is something that I wrote. But the reason the witch hunt narrative works so effectively is not because it is logically sound. It works because it exploits deeply embedded psychological and sociological mechanisms that most people are entirely unaware of. Understanding these mechanisms is essential to understanding how an entire nation was convinced to look away from allegations of child abuse and to feel righteous about doing so. Because that's what this is, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone feels so fucking righteous when it comes to looking away from this. Now, I have determined that there are 5 mechanisms. I'm not going to go into depth like my writing is on all of these, but I'll give enough to be able to make sure people understand. The first mechanism is historical anchoring. From a psychological standpoint, the Salem witch trials occupy a unique position in the American consciousness. They are one of the earliest and most universally taught examples of collective moral failure in American history, which is why I think it's so weird, dude. Why are we taught this? Why are we taught this in public school? Because like you were mentioning pre-show, dude, you were taught at multiple grades. So was I.
Mm-hmm.
And
I got in trouble during the movie because I didn't give a shit. I remember that much.
Right. And I didn't really either, dude. And like I care about it now because of this, but outside of this, dude, I still don't care about it.
Right.
Like, it's fascinating historically, but like it's like a one-off thing.
I'm curious what, like, because obviously you've heard so many different kind of justifications for it.
Right.
Like I'll forever remember, I think Joe Rogan it was, right, who has said many different times the ergot or right in the bread essentially or in the wheat basically
Bullshit.
cause psychedelic. I know, man. It feels like you just desperately want to find an interesting justification and excuse for, and also psychedelics. Obviously, he's very much.
No. Psychedelics don't work that way. You cannot ingest mold, and you will not trip, dude. You'll kill yourself before you can ingest enough mold to make you trip.
You think they were practicing legit black magic, and that there's, I mean, obviously that was happening. So I'm just curious as to, because clearly it became this false framework in terms of the narrative that we were taught, right? That, oh, these poor women were just persecuted, you know, and these people were so undereducated, I guess, at the time, right? That they had this kind of animalistic reaction in the moment to what seemed to be this esoteric, you know, justification for what was happening. That never made sense either, right?
No, like, I think it's way simpler than all of this, dude. I think that these girls, these little girls that were accusing all of these people, because that's what it was like a 9 and 10-year-old little girl. Back then, kids were supposed to be seen and not heard, right? Like that's how they were raised.
Plus, so now the age of consent, right? That didn't exist very much, I don't believe. And beyond that, what age are you basically intended to become pregnant and have a child? I mean, it's like 12, honestly, back then, 12 and 13, that was happening. Right? Well,
it kind of depends, because that wasn't widely accepted.
Okay, that's good.
It was accepted in some circles, but not all circles, right? So that's also kind of a historical misunderstanding that we're taught, like, because we were taught like, oh, they were just marrying 10 and 12-year-olds left and right. No, the fuck they weren't. No, they weren't.
That would be like, very, very concerning if that was
right. It's like, that's not how it was. That's like, yes, it did happen more frequently than it would ever happen now, but it was not like a very common thing. And even back then, it was still like, ooh, weird. Why are you doing that kind of a thing, right? Like it wasn't socially acceptable still. But I think these little girls found a way to get attention.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's, now I'm not saying that there wasn't any black magic back then, because I think black magic is a thing. I've experienced, I've participated in it, and it's real. It is fucking real. But I think it is just as simple as these girls were able to get attention for the first time. And so it's just human psychology. Like, even if it's bad attention, which it was bad attention, they were doing a bad thing.
Right.
You know, they kept naming people. So they were able to keep getting the attention.
That's interesting. Because even on LSD, right? Like, just as far as, I don't know, my experience with psychedelics, I just remember mushrooms I always kind of like appreciated, because it feels like almost a happy thing that the entire, you know, almost, it never, and it always felt like it was more organic, clearly, right? From the earth in a way. And it felt like I wasn't taking these chemicals or something.
Way different than like LSD or DMT or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always was just happy, you know, as far as that was going to, but LSD, man, like, it's such a strange compound, right? And I mean, I could never really even imagine this kind of context of it playing out in that way, even if you were exposed to some, you know, extent of
I don't think psychedelics had anything to do with it.
I don't either, because I remember there was one moment where the wind was like picking up, right? And I felt like I heard like musical resonance on the wind, like riding the wind. And it was God Bless the Dead by Tupac, which is the strangest thing you could ever, you know what I mean? But still, the fact that I'll never forget that moment. And I just think, like, there's no way I could imagine, obviously, that becoming some sort of psychological justification for burning witches at the stake.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
No, I don't. So if anybody wants my perspective on the Salem witch trials, I think the perfect explanation for all of it, and I've read lots of books. Anyone that wants a book, I have 3 PDFs that are close to 1,000 pages long. One of them's like 700 pages. The other one's 8 something. And the last one is 1,000 pages. Anyone that wants to read about the Salem witch trials, I will give you all the information you need. But I think the best breakdown of anybody that does it is actually King Trout, if you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, he does the best breakdown of it and gives the most like reasonable explanation. And I think it was just these little girls literally found a way to get attention.
Man, you're inspiring me to go back and kind of comb through some interesting avenues of research and information on the Salem witch trials, because I just never myself took the dive to properly understand and at least come to some type of conclusion in my own mind that I'm confident in. I haven't yet done that, so I'm eager to basically use this.
Yeah, it's interesting. And you know what? I'm open to hearing like alternative theories. It's just I've got to keep my basis in reality. And I just know how little kids are. And I also have a pretty firm understanding. Now, I'm not an expert, but I have a firm understanding of what things were like back then. You know, little kids were seen and not heard, period. And little kids love to be seen and heard, you know, like that's just how little kids are, dude. And I think these girls ended up feeling bad because they did end up admitting later on that they lied. Right. Yeah. Especially when people started fucking dying.
Yeah, man.
But then again, I also think these 2 little girls were little pieces of shit, honestly, because of the way that they were raised. I mean, their lies led to the death of several people, you know, and it didn't stop until it was like the governor's wife was accused. And then the governor was like, whoa, we gotta stop this.
This is too far.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny.
It's like, well, yeah, no shit, you've got to stop this. Like, this should have been stopped at the first person, right? We shouldn't listen to 9 and 10-year-old girls about who's a witch, right?
It certainly shouldn't use that information to then go burn women at the stake. I mean,
exactly. Like I'm willing to listen to a 9 and 10-year-old about a lot of things, but then I'm also not going to like pick up like torches and pitchforks, you know, and go chase somebody like Frankenstein's monster.
You have legitimate evidence that you can kind of point to reinforce what the children said. Obviously, that's the only way I would feel comfortable. But yeah, you know, I'm not surprised at all that there's an alternative story to that event that still has transcended its time into becoming.
Dude, it's crazy we're even talking about it. It's crazy that we don't have to explain exactly what the Salem witch trials is. It's crazy because most people in the chat, most people that watch this in the future, they already know what we're talking about. How is that? How is that? So
what was that? The Crucible? Wasn't that what it was called? Yeah, that was what they would always reference constantly because it was the dramatized Hollywood version of this event, and it would fully reinforce all of this kind of false framework of what potentially happened and the motivating factors. So I'm not surprised they used this ridiculous TV movie in a way to prove out their concept to generations of vulnerable children, right?
And it's easy to spin too, and so like I said, this is our historical anchoring, and so from a psychological standpoint, the Salem witch trials occupy a unique position in the American consciousness.
It's true, yeah.
So this is the because the witch hunt directly jumps back to the Salem witch trial.
It really does. Directly references back to that moment, and it instantly drives the subconscious point into its proper place as far as in the vast majority of especially Americans.
Exactly.
Because I'm not certain as to what level it's kind of implemented in curriculum worldwide. I'm not entirely sure, but
I'm pretty sure it's a pretty uniquely American and maybe Canadian thing.
That makes sense because obviously it's foundational in terms of the American experiment in a way, right?
Right. So this is the first mechanism in the witch hunt frame and why it works so well, right? So the second mechanism is an exploitation of social conformity. Okay. In sociology, this is well documented through the work of Solomon Asch, right? The Asch experiment and his conformity experiments. As
Winona
well,
was hot in the crucible. Says Banhammer. Hey man, you're not wrong. I saw a report of some guy who I think Toad posted a hilarious tweet the other day about Winona Ryder, and basically that it was some leading man for a band that she dated back in the day who was like he said she had like an extraordinary appetite for sex, and that he had a complaint that was very interesting. He said that Winona's her breasts were way larger in real life than they looked on the screen, and that she was exhausting him because she had this apparently she had this not only the sexual appetite, but she called it hide the sausage. She would constantly try and pull him in the bed and play hide the sausage. And he said, I'm so exhausted that he had to leave her. I thought that was the funniest thing ever.
That is very funny. That is very funny. I'll never look at her the same.
Right. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, brother.
So yeah, the second mechanism is the exploitation of social conformity, which is explained through the Asch experiments, and of course a theory known as the spiral of science. Okay, or spiral of silence. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Once the witch hunt label gains enough cultural traction, once enough journalists, academics, and public intellectuals repeat it, a social pressure forms around it. And so people are like almost expected to carry this on. Okay. This is the second mechanism of why this works so much, which is why it is so key to exposing the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, because those are the ones that really pushed this whole acceptance through the conformity through journalists, academics, and public intellectuals.
Right.
So the third mechanism is what psychologists call the just world hypothesis, okay? And this is something we all suffer from. This is the deeply held cognitive bias that the world is fundamentally fair. That like, it's just that it's fundamentally fair, that people generally get what they deserve and deserve what they get. When confronted with allegations of organized ritualistic child abuse, the just world hypothesis creates intense cognitive dissonance.
Man, this is beautiful, brother. Honestly, it
Thank
really
you.
isn't. Yeah.
So I've got two more mechanisms for why this works so well. And once again, these are all together, right? Like it's all of this that
the chat's dangerously retarded.
Yes.
Right now. Go ahead.
The fourth mechanism is the role of repetition and illusory truth effect. This is one of the most well-documented phenomenon in cognitive psychology. The more frequently a statement is repeated, the more likely people are to believe it is true. Period.
Absolutely. Yes. Right.
So it's just been repeated and repeated and repeated.
Mm-hmm. It's obvious the Satanic Panic was, an unhinged, right?
Yep.
Overreaction.
Obviously, it was just, hysterical Christians freaking out for no fucking reason.
Exactly.
Like, get out of here.
Right.
And then the fifth, and this is the most insidious mechanism and probably the most important, is identity protective cognition. Okay. This concept is studied extensively in the field of cultural cognition by researchers like Dan, I believe, Kaihan at Yale. Describes the tendency of individuals to process information in ways that protect their sense of belonging to a cultural group.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
That's perfect, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So
that is so seductive. That is a seductress right there. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So once the witch hunt narrative became the dominant position among the educated, secular, mainstream cultural voices, journalists, professors, legal scholars, television producers, it became entangled with identity. To reject the witch hunt framing was to align yourself with the people the narrative had already discredited.
Oh my God. That's exactly what they're doing. You know, it's
Right.
oh man. That's why I think
It's crazy.
when I covered the witch hunt narrative, when I did the Presidio, I think I did one part Presidio, one part McMartin or something to that effect, and covered
Right.
a little bit of like West Point and some of that in between,
Right.
I guess. But man, I legitimately felt what I wrote that day, as far as I think it's time to elicit profound contempt, right? Is how I felt, by unmasking the deliberate subterfuge intended to overwhelmingly convince the ever-gullible herd marching in lockstep of a hysterical witch hunt narrative, largely caused by an irrational moral panic. And
Yeah.
I just said, to this day, how is that not obviously what the entire purpose of manufacturing this false framework of the satanic panic overreaction? It's just the way in which you provide a cover up, you know?
Yeah, it is. And in fact, just to tie that off, I'll just give you the quick step-by-step breakdown of how this game is played, okay?
Mhm.
Check this out. Step 1, the label is introduced. Step 2, the accusers are reframed as aggressors. Step 3, the historical analogy is cemented. Step 4, the evidence is buried beneath the narrative. And step 5, the cultural verdict is delivered.
Isn't that exactly what we've seen so
Yes,
many
it is.
times? Yeah, as
Fucking
a
Michael
result.
Aquino, dude. He was the master of the mind war, and which is why you hear it from him time and time again. Him and his wife. Him and his bitch wife. I can't stand
Lilith.
her. Yeah.
For her name to
Lilith.
even be Lilith,
I
it's
know.
huge. It's problematic in its own right.
Right, exactly.
Crazy,
and
man.
he knew this. He knew this stuff. And this is how I learned all of this, is reading his writings.
Mhm.
Because he's a fucking nerd, right? And
Yeah,
I
they
sifted through all of his writings to be able to figure out this 5-step plan.
Good for you, man. I'm glad you did it, because I'm tired of this shit. No, I think it's so valuable, man. And it again is just it's the kind of I don't know what's the key, right? For a map, right? In reality, to properly trace through the evidentiary connections that make this undeniable. And I'm sorry, but when you have all of these prominent personalities convicted of pedophilia and overt sex crimes, then what are we even debating? You know, it's like, for anyone to even imagine using the term satanic panic, like, what's his name? The dangerous retard in the worst possible way that we reference far too often, that comes out basically running defensive, and he's the vanguard and protector of pedophiles. What's his name, damn it, who's always basically defending Alan Dershowitz and you know who I'm
Michael
talking
Tracy.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, to actually use the term satanic panic while referencing the Epstein files.
Yeah, with a straight fucking face, with a straight smug face, because you know it was smug.
Oh yeah, it just shows the witch hunt narrative is never died down. It's alive and well, and they will continue to weaponize this and exploit this as a tool to push back and cause people to question the reality and the serious nature of how much of this is actually credible. And
They're literally using your mind against you, and like your social biases, and like your desire to fit in with the group. That's what they're manipulating.
the majority of people don't even want to know this in the first place.
Right.
And I don't blame them for that. It's just, when it boils down to it, you're voluntarily becoming ignorant and falling into the trap, right? And so
Right.
you're essentially maintaining this level of ignorance through your conditioning and programming,
Which
again,
is maintaining the system that allows these things to continue happening.
exactly.
So, yeah, I don't blame people for not wanting this either. However, by not knowing this stuff, you are literally allowing for satanic ritual abuse to take place.
Exactly, man. And that's why it's not about, an entire I don't know, a percentage or a group of the vast majority of people. Essentially, I think the way that I put it, actually, I said, what happens if we've all been brainwashed and persuaded to dismiss something as consequential and as esoteric occult practices and satanic ritual abuse?
Right.
And I referenced that specific point by saying a world filled with people who would rather not know, intrinsically refusing to confront the existence of evil.
Yeah.
Just what we've been discussing. It's
Right.
Evil exists. Yeah, it does, and it takes on a form that you could never even imagine. And the
Oh, and
moment,
it's so much worse than you think it is.
exactly, the moment you catch a glimpse of that monster, it's like you'll never forget it. And unfortunately, if you have any ethical bone in your body, it will drive you forward into finding more out about in terms of being able to apply this concept moving forward to where you can feel confident that you understand the mechanisms of power and the way in which, this paradigm has been
Right.
constructed around us. And only then can we kind of reject that programming and think through things critically and not fall into those preordained outcomes. It's the only way,
Right.
But geez, buddy, this is just, I love you so much, man. And I
Love
really
you
do
too, brother.
appreciate you
Love you
more than I
too.
think you realize, because this is something that, it haunts me, right? And I think it
Right.
should all of us. And the more you're aware of these things, the more uncomfortable you should be, right? And that
100%.
doesn't mean you let it destroy you. But dear
No,
God,
no,
I
no.
mean,
This should be fuel to fight, period.
yeah,
And
fuel to
and
fight the dragon, right?
Mhm.
In some
Right.
sort of way.
And
Yeah.
it has to be collectively, because we can't do it just you and I,
Mhm.
This is a collective fight. And granted, not everyone should start a podcast. Not everyone needs to go out and just like help survivors. Like everyone has their place, but even just knowing about it is enough, And to have these hard conversations when appropriate, these shouldn't be hard conversations to have.
No.
And so breaking down the social norm of like, oh, we don't talk about this because it's not polite. It makes people uncomfortable. Good. Make people uncomfortable if that's all you can do. But we've got to have these conversations because this is happening. It's not stopping. And the only way we are going to get it to stop is to actually talk about it and confront it.
Exactly. And in a responsible way,
Right.
And that doesn't mean you can't have a good time, right? Because
Right.
if we don't, then we would run away crying and screaming. It's essentially
Right.
how it would
Right.
affect us. And so I feel like it's the only way we can kind of keep a straight face. And I mean, you hear how emotional I become just reading the primary source material of many
Right.
of these allegations, and victim
Right.
witness accounts. And it's just like, it's imperative, though. It's something that you cannot turn a blind eye to, and effectively have a worthwhile concept in terms of any sort of avenue of forming an opinion that you feel is worth being heard. And it's like,
Right.
I just feel like they really just don't take that serious enough, and
Right.
just run off at the mouth without thinking things through. And it only, you're dancing with the devil when you play that game. And I just
Right.
think at the end of the day, you're doing the bidding of this unfortunate, sinister power cabal that exists and has for generations. And man,
I agree. I couldn't agree more.
that that so that David Schroeder connection to the paperboy fetish that I was mentioning, right?
Yeah.
So his father, I said, was Robert Lynn Schroeder Jr., mother's Joanne C. Schroeder, And David Schurter, the victim, claims that basically he was told of a man named Aaron Larson, who happened to be with Jacob Wetterling when he was abducted on October 22nd, 1989. Yes. Now, he says also this man, Aaron Larson, claims to be Jacob's best friend at that time. He said he essentially tried to get in contact with him, had responded, and never really, the guy never really followed up and got back into contact with him and provided him more of the story. But so he's claiming he hasn't heard anything from Aaron or anyone else regarding this specifically since that he was messaging him on Facebook, apparently at one point.
Right.
And he basically, he says that he just assumed, right, that this guy, Aaron Larson, had recognized his father, David Schurter's father, who basically apparently went to authorities and was told not to contact him, right? As far as this individual, it's very strange, but I would anyway. He says that basically 15 plus years he struggled to get his father investigated. He was trying to basically, call the authorities to investigate his father's criminal action, and
I'm sure the authorities didn't fucking believe him.
No interest whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
And guess why? The witch hunt narrative.
100%.
The people that deny this shit happens makes it harder for people to come forward. Just saying.
Right. So he says that he went to the Nebraska State Patrol and demanded that cold case detective John Pinconin take his DNA to compare it to Ricky Chadek.
Damn.
Who was apparently abducted and found murdered in Omaha, Nebraska. On Lawrence E. King, anyone?
Yeah, right. Oh, shit.
On March 23rd, 1989 as well. So all within the framework of the timetable in regard to the Franklin scandal. So this detective Pinconin sent his sister, True Pinconin, to basically ingratiate herself into both David Schurter and his older sister's lives. This is the claim. So apparently the interesting thing about the murder of Ricky Chadek is that he was murdered exactly the same way Danny Joe Eberle, which is Eberle, September 18th, 1983, and also Christopher Walden, who were both murdered, these two boys. Apparently the two boys that John Jubert, Jubert, was executed for, apparently murdering these two boys on July 16th, 1996. Wow. So this was kept out of the news, and he claims he only knows about this because Detective Pinconin told both him and his sister of the fact that this actually occurred. So Jubert, I'm not entirely sure, couldn't have possibly murdered Chadek in 1989 since he was already in custody on January 12th, 1984. Oh no, we have another Wayne Williams sort of situation playing out here. Already in custody, and boys are still going missing in Atlanta.
Oh, right. Almost like when Ted Bundy left Washington and women kept disappearing for some reason.
What do you know?
Interesting. Huh.
Not a lone wolf sole perpetrator, it doesn't seem, right?
Interesting.
So
crime never happens.
Yeah, right. So the same year in 1976, apparently, the same year that a man found the Schurter family, who was searching for his own abducted daughter, and who was forced to apparently light on fire 4 children who were found ritually murdered in Michigan by the names of Mark. He names all these people as well. Mark Stebbins, who was abducted in February of 1976 and found murdered, I think 4 days later, because it was February 15th, he was abducted and then was basically ritually murdered and found his body by the 19th. And then Jill Robinson, abducted December 22nd. This is all happening within the same 1976, found murdered 4 days later, right? December 26th. Then Christine Milhelich, definitely an interesting last name. Christine Milhelich, I believe that's how you would pronounce it. She was abducted on January 2nd, 1977, found murdered January 23rd. And Timothy King, who was abducted March 16th, 77, found murdered March 22nd. So
That's
David
wild.
Schurter says he's spoken with Michigan State Police, who asked if he basically asked him if he was Bob, an anonymous man who came forward in 2005 and started claiming that he actually knew who had killed these children, and which was also the same time that apparently David Schurter's father had started blowing the whistle or coming clean and calling people to tell them of his crimes. Yeah.
Interesting.
Hmm.
You know what comes to mind hearing all of this is that quote from Hunter S. Thompson about how there's a rash of kidnappings in the fall or during the football season, and
Right.
Like that just comes to mind. And honestly, it, in my opinion, lends more credence to the fact that he produced snuff films,
Absolutely.
like that was his business ultimately. Like he might have been a journalist on the top, and he might have been the gonzo journalist that he created. He had that persona, but then underneath he was creating snuff films.
Yeah. I mean, just because he actually told the story on live television or in his book Hell's Angels as well,
Right.
About them committing that abuse as far as the MC club.
Right.
Yeah, you were there, bro. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like as much as you acted like you actually attempted to defend and protect the woman, you still very much were there. And the way I
Right.
guess he now who knows the reality of that, because it
Right.
did seem like it was almost meant for TV in a way, right? The way
Right.
it was kind of
And that's kind of how gonzo journalism kind of is too. It's very cynical and very, very kind of Hollywood-esque,
Yeah.
but
This-
I do think there's truth in it, because think about this. His story, Fear and Loathing, is what brought adrenochrome into the minds of Americans,
that's
right?
for damn sure, man.
Like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is that about,
And you remember that deleted scene we played on Already Dead,
Right.
I think it was. Holy shit, right? I didn't realize it had gone that far and legitimately referencing witchcraft and satanic ritual murder in
Right.
multiple different states as well.
Right.
And yeah, just
I mean,
and
it
that was
comes
at
up in the book too, if anyone's ever read
Mhm.
it.
And that
So-
was what, speaking to a detective that was there because of the police
Yep.
convention that was
Yep.
being hosted at the Vegas hotel. So
Right.
yeah, it's just a lot to unpack, and there's no possible way that knowing who Hunter S. Thompson was and obviously his role as a security guard at the Esalen Institute,
Right.
I'm a little bit skeptical
Right.
of you
Right.
potentially being a part of the
Right.
Laurel Canyon crowd, I guess is the best
Well,
way.
yeah, exactly. And then the Esolan Institute, kind of says to me like undercover Scientologist, and at the very, very least, like if I'm being as charitable as possible, mind control operation,
Yeah.
Like,
That's what I feel. I think it's Tavistock 2.0 West, in
Right.
the West, sort of,
West
right?
Coast. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it
Makes
always
sense.
felt to me. And
Right.
I think, oh, this is when David Schurter comes up with the allegations tying in Johnny Gosh. That's
Okay.
what fascinated me, because he had
I was
already mentioned,
interested about that, because that's,
right?
I mean, that makes so much sense, the stories that he's telling, and the fact that
Mhm.
he's name dropping all of these. I don't know, it kind of gives credence to it.
Hell yeah, he does. If he were just saying these things without providing all of these details, it would be
Right.
far less convincing, and it wouldn't have appealed to me as much. That's for damn sure. But yeah, for him to mention Jacob Wetterling and his father's role in the abduction and
Right.
ritual murder of that individual paperboy, then I take this all the more seriously when he starts talking about Johnny Gosh. Now, Noreen Gosh, mother of abducted Johnny Gosh, many people have pushed back. I've seen claiming that she had a role to play in what inevitably occurred with her son. I think his father no doubt had a role to play. I believe
Right.
he took him to, I don't think it was Offutt Air Force Base, but it might have been. It was one of these Air Force bases where Michael Aquino was known to essentially house the Monarch Boys, is the way it was put.
Right.
And I'll find that here in a moment, so I don't miss the actual institution itself that was responsible. But at the same time, it's worth mentioning that Jacob Wetterling's father had basically pulled him out of school one day before he was abducted, taken him on a road trip to this Air Force base where Michael Aquino was known to have been experimenting upon the Monarch Boys.
Right.
Paul Benassi himself claimed this. And Paul Benassi, if you remember, obviously claims he helped in the abduction of Johnny Gosch and actually
Right.
chloroformed him and put him in the back of the van with multiple other people. By the way, mentioning Phil Paskey and another person who happened to match the description of one John Wayne Gacy, but that's just another story, I guess. Right?
Yeah, no coincidence. It's just a coincidence. Lots of people look alike. Whatever.
Mhm. Oh man, so Johnny Gosch, basically, Noreen even told David Schurter that she had received a phone call from his father. All right. So David Schurter's father, the satanic cult member dating back genealogically to the 13 colonies and Beethoven, apparently was known very much so to Noreen Gosch. And that she had received a phone call from his father who told her that he was guilty of, quote, horrible crimes against children and that he was involved with her son's abduction, although she told him that she thought he was just a crazy person until she spoke with David Schurter, the son.
Right.
Oh, man. So I feel like there's something to be done in terms of attempting to reinforce the credibility of these allegations that he's coming forward with.
Right.
I myself definitely feel the need to probe deeper into this case specifically, because he goes on to, make this interesting connection to the Oakland County child murders and these four specific abductions, and that this was all happening the exact same time his father started to come clean about his crimes again. And to this day, no one still knows who this, quote, Bob is, although Bob is what his stepmother always called his father, Robert Lynn Schurter Jr.
Bob.
Yes.
Fucking Bob.
Fucking Bob, man. So take me back to the Black Lodge, right?
No kidding.
Yeah, man. That's a little too close to, as far as just connecting directly in. Yeah. Too much, dude, my friend.
That's wild. I'm gonna have to get my hands on that book.
Right.
Especially, that sounds a little. I mean, on one hand, like I get it. I understand the perspective of like why this sounds like fantastical.
Right.
But then again, people who think that this is fantastical are like fucking fans of Disney, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is like, you believe in magic, motherfuckers. Like, right. This is real. Mm-hmm. This happens, right? Like, and also you believe like, like people will watch a Star Wars movie and root for the rebels, right? Mm-hmm. But then when it comes to like the government or whatever, they're like, I guess follow the rules. It's like, like this disconnection between shit is what I'm trying to mean here. Is like, I don't understand, like, where do you think stories come from? Right. They come from real life, right? Mm-hmm. And when people try to tell you about real life and you just deny it, like, I mean, I understand people like deny this shit happens. I just don't understand why, right. Like, I know why. It's a lot of things, I explained it in the why the witch hunt narrative works. It's a lot of fear. People are paralyzed by fear, and I get that. Also, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that once they admit that this exists, they have to do something. Oh, yeah. It's like, God, yeah, right. You do have to do something. You're right. You 100%. Have to stop children from being harmed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry you have to get off your ass and stop watching your NFL long enough to help a kid.
Right. Which is
you fucking monster.
I know, man. And that's when, I this instantly made me remember the Johnny Gosh connection to the evidence that had been acquired through, I believe it was Project Ambition, which is this, obviously, when it comes down to um, Detective James Rothstein, right? Like I very much value his just talk about pivotal work that
Right.
unmasked this. It wasn't only international in framework and scope, but this very much kind of laid out the domestic kind of tentacles, right? Spread throughout the United States, and how this specific organized operation of human compromise was systematically entrenched, as I've said so many times.
Right.
And I think it was because this is a perfect example as far as Detective James Rothstein and his evidence in regard to Tippy Richardson on how these networks are often covered up and facilitated as in that kind of deceptive strategy. Well, you have former New York police detective and ex-head of the department's human trafficking and vice-related crimes division is what James Rothstein was effectively responsible for, right? And it was in 68 when he himself, who many people apparently called Jimmy Boots, right, is his
Right.
nickname, was tasked with uncovering the CIA's massive trafficking and pedophile networks, which he would report to the New York State Select Committee on Crime. And this is undoubtedly another example of primary source material that proves this undeniable network and how it's been structured.
Right.
And he says, quote, "I was given unlimited money and my job was to find out what was going on, and it was spent infiltrating the shadow government using pedophilia, prostitution, human trafficking." Now, he attempted to arrest key perpetrators, and he was continually thwarted in this effort. There's a choice example here, is when he served the head of the CIA's human compromise operation, his words, Tippy Richardson. So, according to a pedophile turned police informant named Ben Rose, right? In November 1971, Tippy Richardson, businessman Leonard Stewart from OPEC, which was obviously Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries is what OPEC is, and a surgeon by the name of Dr. Chesky, allegedly raped and murdered 3 boys aged 14 to 15 years old in Ben Rose's apartment on East 64th Street in New York City. The New York State Select Committee on Crime subsequently served subpoenas on both Tippy Richardson and Leonard Stewart, member of OPEC. When served, Richardson said that because he worked for the CIA, the subpoena would be withdrawn under the National Security Act by the time Rothstein and his colleague returned to their offices. It was. Like, he was telling the truth.
Oh, imagine that.
Mhm.
Imagine that.
This is the same Detective James Rothstein, right, who was on board the Essex, which was a military intelligence vessel, the very
Right.
time that it was sent to the Bay of Pigs, when the Bay of Pigs operation was being conducted. And so this was all covertly done. They apparently, the individuals on the vessel itself didn't even know the in location and destination of where they were heading. Yeah. And they even apparently took a strange route in order to evade any sort of surveillance being done on the vessel itself. And so it turns out, who else was on board this vessel?
Yeah.
It happened
no
to
kidding.
be almost entirely staffed with Operation 40 assets, who would then, obviously pick up the reins domestically back when they come, essentially stateside, to green light the JFK assassination plan, which was
Right.
all Operation 40 members and obviously the Cubans from the Bay of Pigs. So he claims that Frank Sturgis happened to be on the Essex that very day, as well as himself, Detective James Rothstein, at the time when they were sent down to Cuba. And he said whenever he got the tip from an informant that Frank Sturgis was heading over to Marita Lorenz's apartment to assassinate her in cold blood because she had boxes of evidence proving the JFK assassination was entirely was entirely staged by the CIA's Operation 40 asset.
What the fuck, dude?
He gets a tip and he shows up. He's waiting outside the apartment, hiding in the bushes, dude, with another detective, waiting for Frank Sturgis, the hitman, the CIA hitman
Right.
who was involved in the Watergate burglary, to, to basically stop him from murdering and assassinating Marita Lorenz. So they already told her, hey, this is happening. You and your daughter need to be whisked away into protective custody,
Right.
at the very least in this moment. And so they take her into protection. Meanwhile, James Rothstein's waiting outside the apartment. Frank Sturgis shows up and essentially, they sit down and they begin to try to interrogate, Frank Sturgis. And basically, Frank Sturgis is unwilling to say anything whatsoever to them until Rothstein mentions the Essex, the intelligence vessel on the Operation 40 mission.
God.
And when he mentioned the Essex, Frank Sturgis looked at him and said, you have to be telling the truth or you would never even know the name of that vessel, right? So he instantly gained the trust of Frank Sturgis just by sort of making those statements because he knew he had known him in the past.
Right.
So, James basically claims that he begins to discuss how Watergate wasn't only to effectively discover sexual blackmail, that was being done on key prominent political figures at the time, because there were kind of two sexual blackmail operations simultaneously being ran that would benefit both sides of the political aisle, which is very interesting. But
imagine that.
They could weaponize.
Imagine that there's a system that, regardless of what side wins, like you're going to win no matter what.
Right.
Imagine.
It's
Wow.
perfect.
What a crazy idea.
It's a foolproof strategy, right? It's just fascinating. And so obviously you have the second part of the questioning apparently involving the Watergate break-in after the first part was about Marita Lorenz and all of this. And so basically, Sturgis, one of the 5 burglars arrested by Sergeant Paul Leeper and Detective Carl Schaffler. I think John Barrett was there as well. But anyway, Sturgis said it was a setup from the start. There had to have been a rat on the inside who sold them out, which we all know was not only Howard Hunt, but I believe there was one additional operative, right, who clearly was a part of the secret agenda at the time,
right?
And they were the only ones operating in that fashion, while the Cubans and even Frank Sturgis and the other burglars were left on the outside looking in, only understanding one priority within the break-in, right? And so this was compartmentalized by design. And so anyway, basically Sturgis said not only was it a setup from the start and that there was a rat obviously on the inside who sold them out, but he also says that the break-in was to get the quote book that had the names of clients who used the prostitution and pedophile ring operating out of the Democratic National Headquarters. This information was to be used to compromise both Republican and Democrat clients who used this ring. And then the break-in itself, obviously, not only the coup d'etat of Nixon, which was strategically kind of leveraged for the, because again, obviously the Houston plan, the strange Moore Radford spy ring of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all of this was happening at the same time. Nixon's trying to run his own intelligence operation from within the White House, right? And the CIA's like, fuck you are, right?
Yeah,
exactly what happened. And,
and mind you, Nixon, the most popular president ever, he won 49 out of 50 states.
Oh my God, that is crazy, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about ultimate support. I mean, he was basically a shoo-in, you know,
Mhm.
and I
Right.
think they were concerned about that, honestly, because for him to even make statements like he did, I'm not saying Nixon was in any way a white hat, but
No, not
right.
not necessarily, but
Mhm.
I think there were white hat elements, you know.
Right.
I mean, people are complicated, dude. Like,
Absolutely, man.
you know,
There's a reason that he would make the statement, you know, about Bohemian Grove, right?
right?
I
Yeah,
don't think that was
the
well
most
received.
faggy goddamn thing you've ever seen.
I don't think that was well received, you know. But
No, no.
but yeah, this is the crazy part, right? He says the pedophile ring. He didn't exclude. He
Right.
legitimately included the fact that it wasn't only clients using prostitution, but a pedophile ring as well that was operating out of the DNC. So that is, I feel like, underreported as far as even within the context of Heidi Reichen and the White House call girl and you
Right.
know, the wonderful book that explains the actual prostitution operation, but they never really tap into the level of sadism involved and that this was actually you know, including and extending to child abuse, right, and
Right.
legitimate pedophilia. So this information was apparently to be used, according to Frank Sturgis, to compromise obviously both sides of the aisle and the clients themselves. But the break-in, now, in fact, he had basically no prior knowledge that the break-in apparently was going to basically even occur, right? In terms of Nixon, right? And so this
Right.
is just something that I think people should be aware of, and that's why he was so surprised. He's like, "Wait, what?" You know, whenever this even went public, and he didn't think it would affect him or have like a negative impact on him whatsoever. But they spun it at surface level with the mainstream media and the Mockingbird media in tow.
Oh
They
yeah.
spun this narrative to legitimately commit a domestic coup d'etat in broad daylight, and it had
Yeah.
nothing to do with Nixon in particular as far as being a perpetrator in his own right,
Right.
right? As far as I can tell, I mean, I haven't seen the actual blackmail, so I'm not entirely certain as to who it implicated being involved. So
Right.
it's possible that Nixon himself could, but then again, you would have imagined that he would have been well aware of the prostitution operation out of the DNC at the time, and it wouldn't have come as a surprise. But
Right.
anyway, so it turns out that obviously later, Schaffler would essentially tell Detective James Rothstein that he had somebody on the inside and had received information. So he's honest about being tipped off. The
Right.
detective, Carl Schaffler, who I told you was handing out poison
Yeah.
candy. Yeah.
Right.
So Schaffler tells Rothstein that he had somebody on the inside, had received information that the break-in was going to happen. Schaffler's tour had ended 1.5 hours before he made the arrest. And apparently Robert Merritt, right, who's called retired Detective Rothstein and stated that he basically was Schaffler's informant. And this all happened in like 2012, I think. And
Right.
he wrote a book, by the way. It was called Watergate Exposed. And he tells, you know, his own version of the break-in. But anyway, it's really crazy that you even have that connection to that interrogation happening,
Right.
you know, in terms of the Marita Lorenz assassination. But the only point I should kind of wind to a close is basically that his second investigation, conducted in the mid 70s by basically the police department, during which 13 homicides plus the murder of these 14 and 15-year-old boys at Ben Rose's apartment, basically they're investigated under the code name Operation Together.
Hmm.
Now, this investigation was under the command of Deputy Inspector John Collin, and at a critical point in the investigation, it was stopped, right? And Inspector Collin was demoted and forced into retirement. So it looks as if there was consequence to be had for even considering actually honestly investigating this, right?
Right.
So then there's a third investigation that Detective James Rothstein attempts to bring forward, done by the New York State Select Committee on Crime. This committee served subpoenas on both Leonard Stewart and Tippy Richardson. When Tippy was served with the subpoena and questioned by the detectives, This is obviously when he informed them that because he worked for the CIA, it would be quashed, the subpoena would be withdrawn. And then during the investigation, basically information was received that Roy Cohn, famed attorney, I can't get away from this man, right?
Yeah,
It's
right.
it's something about Roy Cohn. Where's my Roy Cohn? It's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's I can't handle it. The Pepe the Frog reference on Tuesday,
Right.
it's just really something to behold. It's never ending. Famed attorney, represented Senator Joe McCarthy at the McCarthy hearings, by the way, helped in covering up the murder and the disposal of the young boys' bodies. That was his role, to
Makes sense.
deflect away from the legitimate evidence and honest investigation that Detective James Rothstein and the New York State Select Committee on Crime was conducting in terms of these child murders.
Yeah, makes sense though. I mean, Roy Cohn is organized crime.
Exactly. Kosher
So,
mafia.
and that's that's exactly what all of this boils down to. Also, is just organized crime.
Mhm.
You know,
You're absolutely right, man, and it really is modern Gladio. I don't care how
Yeah.
annoyed people become with the way we exhaust that statement. It's real, and it's
Right.
always in play, right?
Right.
And to know,
Yeah, I agree. It's modern Gladio, and it's mixed with Phoenix coming home.
absolutely, dude.
Because this is a two-part. This really is a two-part program that goes hand in hand with all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's both programs. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen, and I think that was always the plan.
Me too, man. I think whenever you see that, and obviously, Son of Sam, David Berkowitz is talking about Roy Cohn. It's
Right.
just the Maury Terry. Like, this is in no way something to not factor in at almost every level of these
Right.
prominent cases affecting just the world at large in this very moment. I mean, Roy Cohn, as I've said many times, Epstein, an extension of. I don't see it any other way. And it's hard to, right? As far as just realizing the impact they had on the structure of society and
Right.
how it's really been kind of funneled into this perfect moment for the power cabal, right? And they're exploiting every level of the psyop to the point to where, as we were discussing Tuesday, it's discrediting anyone who is willing to consider these alternative theories as far more plausible. It's discrediting them at face value to even
Right.
imagine, just falling into some of these more cartoonish concepts, right, that
Right.
they've laid out before us for that very reason. So it is important, I think, for us to always just kind of pause, reflect on what we think we know to be true, and always be willing to restructure that fundamental foundation that you've tried to create for yourself, because the moment you feel overconfident is the moment you're making a major mistake, and
Right.
it will have a consequence. And anyway, so Roy Cohn, I just want to
agree.
finish this one note on him, and then we'll shut up and probably end up winding down to a close. But so not only was he sent to essentially cover up the disposal of these young boys' bodies by Tippy Richardson and three others at the very least. When Roy Cohn's question about the murder of these three, teenage boys at Ben Rose's apartment, he stated that yes, he was aware of what had happened, but would comment no further. Information circulating at the time was that Cohn was often used to compromise people. And if situations such as those described by Ben Rose occurred, Roy Cohn would take care of them. Rose also supplied information as to the methamphetamine sales and juice bars owned by organized crime.
There it is.
Yeah, man. These bars served as meeting places for child prostitutes, pedophiles, and various pedophile rings.
Oh, you mean like the bars in Milwaukee that Jeffrey Dahmer went to?
Yes, sir.
Interesting. Interesting.
And by the way, it was Detective James Rothstein who followed Jeffrey Dahmer all the way, from as far as his track from the north, essentially from really the northeast. He followed this network through Wisconsin, right? He followed
Right.
it into these other geographical locations where very prominent for the network, and that happened to be one of those. As far as where Jeffrey Dahmer was allegedly committing these
Right.
solo acts of
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he totally carried that acid barrel into his bedroom all by himself. Yep. The barrel that took 2 guys and a dolly to remove from his bedroom. Yep, he did that all by himself.
Mhm. Exactly. It was all Jeffrey Dahmer. Wasn't it Dahmer who broke out of prison when that dude from his church showed up and tried to have a conversation with him, and he was kind of eyeing like the ceiling tiles and the entire time they were discussing something, and then he found a way to break out, and he goes straight back to a sorority and brutally rapes a girl there. I forget.
No,
Yeah, dude,
no.
it wasn't Dahmer.
I don't think it was Dahmer.
Dude, who
'Cause
was that?
I don't think Dahmer ever escaped.
Okay, I forget now then because it's one of the it's the one that I always think is Dahmer. So it has to hold on, let me find out because it was such a strange story. I think it might not have been Dahmer. It's possible that it was someone else, but let me figure it out. What were in prison? Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to find it later and try and reference it again in the future. But yeah, Ted, dude,
somebody said
it's
Bundy.
Ted Bundy, bro. Yeah, it was Ted Bundy. Yeah.
See, I don't believe Bundy went to was guilty of the sorority at all.
Really? You think it was
Really?
probably someone else? Then that
Oh yeah,
that
because
could very well apply.
the evidence used to tie him to the sorority was the bite mark, right?
Mhm.
But what happened when they did the bite mark evidence, the coroner took the mold of Bundy's teeth, right, and pressed it into the dead body, creating the bite mark.
So they fabricated evidence. That's
Right.
amazing. See, that makes way more sense. So I really wonder what happened with that prison break story then, because it was
Right.
apparently
I
a
don't know.
member of his church who was like, well, he always seemed like a good guy, because he basically would go to this, I don't know if it was an evangelical church, but it was sort of, that's the type of person that it kind of
Right.
seemed like was represented in this. And yeah, they were trying to kind of like, oh, well, maybe it's not true, right? Like
Right.
Ted seemed like a really nice guy. And so
Right.
they go and visit him. And I remember he goes to visit them to basically just kind of check on him and see how he's doing, and to see if he can gain any kind of a plausible window into if he's guilty or not. And he's already assuming that he's not guilty. And so he goes in and he's basically meeting with Ted Bundy, and the whole time apparently Bundy is trying to strategically figure out if he can escape through the ceiling tiles.
Right.
And so he's like just playing along with whatever this conversation was, not really giving a shit whatsoever, and then actually using it as an opportunity to stage a prison break. And that's legitimately apparently what happened. And then the authorities claimed after the fact that this is when he went directly back after breaking out of prison to the sorority house and sexually assaulted. And I don't remember if he murdered the girl or not. I thought he did, but it's been a while since.
Yeah, I I don't believe he went to the sorority at all. I don't believe
Makes
that was him.
sense, man. It makes sense that this would be a cover story for the body still falling after Ted Bundy is in custody, right? And if they wanted to actually, I don't know, tie off a couple of loose ends that were still out there, this would be a plausible enough way.
That's what I think they did. And I think
Right.
that very last girl that Bundy was tied to, dude, she was like in junior high or elementary or something. That's like way out of his MO,
Right.
Like,
Yeah, 100%.
no, Bundy went after like young women, right?
Right.
Like he didn't go after children. and that the only evidence tying him to that crime was one hair, right? Which is bullshit evidence, right?
Right.
You can't tie a hair to somebody, and a hair, and one eyewitness that came forward that had to be placed under hypnosis to remember.
Oh, well, that's very convenient.
Yeah, isn't it? Isn't
Oh
it?
my God.
Right. Those are the two pieces of evidence that they, slammed against him in the state of Florida, and they convicted him. So,
Right. How about we end it on this, unless, and then I'll ask you for your final thoughts, sort of thing,
Yeah.
if you're okay with that. It's basically the fact that, and I think I discussed this with you, I can't remember when it was, but it just recently kind of fell into my lap as far as the video footage of Paul Benazzi during the interview, where he essentially switches altars. He basically assumes an altar during the course of the interrogation. And this altar was allegedly known as West Lee, right? And by the way, I think it's interesting that he claims, the original claim was that it was as late as 12 years old that Benassi was brought into the network, but that's not true whatsoever. And then there's a statement where he said he was 7. Okay. And then he says, actually, no, I was 3 when it all started, but 7 was when I was technically kind of activated as an asset to effectively, basically perform a type of service for the enterprise itself. Right.
Right.
And so he when I'm watching this, he like flips into the altar known as Wesley, and he starts referring to himself, Paul Benazzi, as in third person, like it's someone else, right? It was interesting as hell. And he says that West Lee is the original alternate identity created by Monarch, which is how he puts it, right? It was Monarch created this altar. And when Paul was 7 years old, West Lee is the altar that was programmed to be a child prostitute for the purpose of blackmailing politicians and high priority targets. Now, that's when, clearly I think the last episode we discussed the origins of Project Monarch. I don't know if we did or not. I think we did. And
I think we did.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And it pretty much just references Michael Aquino's role in the origin of Project Monarch. And I think it was there was a renowned blackmail photographer, right, who was convicted in December of 1990 for publicly displaying pornographic photographs of minors. The case stemmed from a 1987 exhibit of his works at Intermail, a gay bookstore in Amsterdam. In the Netherlands, where Francis Sheldon of the North Fox Island, infamous perpetrator pedophile, would then obviously abscond to when North Fox Island went public of the human hunting parties being arranged out of, and promoted out of Padika magazine, and the connection to the Delta Project and John David Norman supplying many of these children. Right. I think John Wayne Gacy was an abductor. He kidnapped children for the enterprise. He probably raped some of them himself, even potentially murdered them. I wouldn't put it past them, but murdering all of them, I highly doubt it. I think he probably helped dispose of the bodies, but they pinned it all on him.
I mean, it was proved that, some of those bodies were dumped when he wasn't there.
Exactly, man.
So,
and by the way, John David Norman, is in prison with Phil Paskey when they rebrand to the Delta Project, and he tells Phil, like, hey, you're going to run it for me with John on the outside while I'm in, and that's 100% what happened. And anyway, the fact that this gay bookstore in Amsterdam, it instantly, just the Netherlands, reminded me of the age of consent laws. I think it makes sense that it's sort of a refuge for pedophiles, right? And I think Francis Sheldon's been pictured and photographed at like child care organizations and orphanages with children on his lap, after he disappeared. Yes.
Like Jimmy Savile.
Like Jimmy Savile. Yeah, exactly, dude. And so,
what a piece of shit.
What a piece of shit. For real. I think there's a reason why these people believe in eugenics, and it's because they're so desperate not to endure the consequences of the afterlife at some level. Yeah. And, I could be wrong, but that they're certainly
I think that's a transhumanist thing too, like why some of them believe in this shit, because they want to be able to live forever and not have to go to the afterlife.
Right. Yeah, I think there's certainly cosmic consequence coming for them in terms of, let's hope so at the very least, right? Gives me a silver lining in all of this. But
I think there is,
yeah,
like I said, evil exists, and if evil exists, therefore good must exist. Like it has to.
that's what I believe, brother.
So at some point in time, somebody's paying for something, and I think it all like we all have to pay for our shit at some point, and there's a special place in hell for these people.
That's exactly how I feel, and it's just so sad that they've been able to stave off these deserving consequences during this lifetime. Many of them, unfortunately, but the police apparently raided this gay bookstore, confiscated 15 of Donald Mader's works. Mader, a U.S. citizen, former co-editor of Padika magazine, was the first person.
Ralph Underwager.
Yes, sir. And John David Norman promoting his service along with Francis Sheldon out of that magazine. That was a straight up pay-to-play subscription model for pedophiles, man. That is what it was. And so Mader, first person to be tried under the new Dutch child pornography law, which bans any nude depiction of a person younger than 16 if presented with erotic intent. Thank God there's something, right? A judge
younger than 16. I can't believe the cutoff is 16.
Isn't that crazy? Did you hear that?
Fine, at least there's something.
I know, that's how I felt too. Did you see that disgusting Russell Brand clip of him saying that, justifying the fact that he had sex with a 15-year-old or something and he starts debating age of consent laws like he's Alan Dershowitz, man.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, I don't care what type of hedonistic lifestyle you're engaging in. That's pedophilia, my friend.
Yeah.
That is not, there's no other way.
Dude, I don't care if you're one day away from turning 17.
Yeah. You're disgusting, and 30 something years old with a 15-year-old. What are you doing, man? You couldn't even, if you can't have a conversation with the person, it's like, right? Like that at the very least should be a firm line in the sand. But,
no kidding.
But my God. Anyway, so that's just unfortunate, in my opinion, that obviously you have this strange Dutch law that's supposed to be a silver lining for us, but it clearly isn't doing enough. Anyway, the judge ruled that 2 of the 15 images were erotic and hence illegal, and claimed further that the boys had been sexually abused. The verdict was widely criticized in the mainstream press and denounced as irrational, promoting censorship. Could you imagine? The mainstream press ran with this false narrative, equating it to censorship, and that it was legitimately denounced as irrational as a reaction by the mainstream press, right?
Yeah. I can
although these kids were sexually abused. So,
my censorship.
Mm-hmm. But there does not seem to be any move, apparently, to alter the strict porn law now that the Dutch age of consent has been lowered from 16 to 12. That was the end result of that case. So at first I was like, oh, well, at least there's a law that, came out of this that would potentially help crack down on some of this sinister. No. Oh, no, actually.
It just got gutted.
It got worse.
Gutted. Yeah. Holy shit.
And by the way, it was Benassi himself, right, who in his interview in 93, because he implicates the FBI and U.S. elites in child torture. And he says that not only was he tasked with smuggling child pornography into the Netherlands,
right,
on behalf of NAMBLA members, trips on behalf of the North American Man-Boy Love Association, the pedophile group now given semi-official status by the United Nations of all organizations.
Yeah, go figure. Another organization that supports pedophilia.
Exactly.
Cool.
So Paul cites traveling to the Netherlands and Germany carrying child pornography for subsequent import to the U.S. to avoid prosecution. Again, another sinister sort of just technique in the playbook. It's very, I think, just imagine using child victims to legitimately traffic child pornography.
Right.
I mean, that's just adding insult to injury in a way you can't even really imagine. But in Amsterdam, he names Charles Hester and the British Tommy Carter, who had on computer a global list of child pornography users. That's who Paul Bonacci named in that interview. Nambla also was obviously cited for organizing the auctions of these children. So they said Vegas is one location. New Mexico happened to be another. Now, why would New Mexico be another when Zorro Ranch was legitimately entrenched because of the loopholes in the government system in the state of New Mexico?
Like how Jeffrey Epstein didn't have to register as a sex offender in New Mexico.
Exactly, man. Exactly. And that's the same thing that Francis Sheldon was doing when he escaped and absconded off to the Netherlands. It's the same playbook.
Dude, it's crazy. In that documentary, Filthy Rich, there's a clip, there's an audio clip of Jeffrey Epstein talking about how solicitation of a minor prostitute is like $100 fine.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and he's like, this is ridiculous. What I was charged for, he's talking about his 2008 charges. And he's like, if you look at anybody else, nobody has been, pressed on as hard as me. And it's like,
oh my God,
what the fuck is wrong with you?
Dude,
like,
did you see Peter Thiel reach out to him during the time where all this was going public? I just saw this report. He says, basically, Peter Thiel contacted Jeffrey Epstein to exchange advice after the press first reported on Epstein's crimes. Listen to this quote from Peter Thiel reaching out to Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, I do hope you're holding up well and that the cycle won't go much further. Do you have any sense on whether this press cycle is going to keep escalating? It would be good to compare notes at some point on strategies on this sort of stuff, period. End quote.
Oh.
Like, what are we doing here? The Epstein is a window into the reality that we are facing. That is what's going on. This is not
and not the first window. Not the first window. Franklin,
Exactly.
It's like
how many others?
How many fucking windows do you need into the system to know how it works?
Exactly, man. All right, we'll wind down with not only mentioning, of course, in passing that who was the very first known victim of John Wayne Gacy, which we've said a few different times on this show. Not only was he the stepbrother of Paul Bonacci, right? But it happens to be that basically Paul Bonacci, right? It's mentioned that his mother, Marilyn May, divorced his biological father, married a man named Jack McCoy. McCoy passed in 1983, but looking at his Find a Grave, you will see that he had a son by the name of Timothy McCoy. Timothy McCoy was the first known victim of John Wayne Gacy, and he was also the kid that Gacy killed out of, quote, self-defense. So you wonder how Paul Bonacci got a glimpse into the pink index cards of John David Norman's Odyssey Foundation and could actually at least identify a man by the name of John Wayne Gacy and Phil Paskey as potential perpetrators involved in the abduction of Johnny Gosch, which he apparently was involved with personally as well.
Right.
Now we can end it with these two clips if you're down for it.
Yeah.
And it's just basically to reinforce so much of what we said. And I played one of these clips a couple of different times in the past, I don't know, month or so, because on different interviews that I've done, because I'm just trying to, again, provide people with a starting point of some kind that I feel like is very much a smoking gun because of the viable, significant, corroborated evidence that has been obviously brought forward and publicized by these individuals that I deem as credible. right? And I don't care what anyone says about Paul Bonacci. I will consistently try to always be objective, but I believe every word of that kid as far as what he endured. And I don't really
I do
imagine,
as well.
unless it's literally a part of his programming to spew the most extraordinary allegations you could imagine, which that in itself is too hard for me there's no way on earth, after we discussed Dutroux,
Yep.
that Paul Bonacci is making this up out of whole cloth. There's no way in my mind.
I agree.
Anyway, it's very sad to witness it firsthand, but here is the unfortunate child victim, one Paul Bonacci, in an interview, an interrogation, where he provides a little bit of a starting point himself as far as the way in which he was abused and brought into this network.
Monarch is an operation that was created by the United States government to create spies for other countries. They use children for the purpose that they're easily integrated into multiple personalities because they can dissociate. Monarch is a program that is run by Michael Angelo Aquino, who was an Army Reserve colonel at Presidio. He is also the leader of the Temple of Set. He also runs a child daycare center. He also is involved in human sacrifice.
Is he employed by the United States?
Yes,
At what facility?
Presidio, California.
Is that in San Francisco area?
Yes,
Naval base?
yes.
Kevin Collins, anyone? Bohemian Grove?
You know what rank Michael Aquino
He
holds?
was a colonel.
Is he currently employed there?
I am not aware of the current situation.
Now, describe the program again, the Monarch program.
Monarch, as I said, was a program that used children to make multiple personalities for future use as spies and as a way to take over the United States government.
Interesting.
The personalities were
Right.
Excuse me, who was intending to take over the United States?
Look at him.
government?
Isn't that strange the way he moves?
I
Mm-hmm.
do not
And
know
talks.
that information.
Did you understand Mr. Aquino to be working on behalf of the United States or against the United States?
I believed he was working on behalf of the United States.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
some segment of the United States was trying to take over the United States government?
You remember that investigative officer or detective that exposed the Star Chamber and the Paul Schultz connection that I used in Columbine, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's just a little bit too hard, to essentially believe that basically it's just fascinating to me, obviously, that you have
Right.
that connection and the Nazi breeding experiment involved in this. And again, what did they claim? That detective, he said it was an organization of rogue intelligence agents, right? And that
Right.
was how he was trying to make sense of it. In reality, this was a clandestine operation, and these individuals were acting, with complete and total kind of approval, right? From
Oh,
the
yeah.
very, exactly.
The plan that Aquino had in it was he wanted to usher in the Antichrist.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Now that applies to David Schroeder, who we were just discussing, who
Right.
claims that he thought he was the Antichrist, or at least an
Right.
Antichrist, which that concept
Well,
in
that's-
itself is interesting.
That's always what Satanists do,
Makes sense, yeah.
like,
For sure.
like why don't want, it's the same thing. Like eventually Christians would want a second coming. Eventually Satanists
You got to
would
have an
want,
Antichrist for the second coming, right?
right, right, exactly. So, I mean, I'm not saying all of them, but some of them, they definitely want this shit. So,
No doubt.
Which is talked about in the Bible.
Yeah. This was a government-sponsored program?
Yes.
You were 7 years old at the time that you were recruited?
I was actually 3 years old when it first began, but I was not created until later on.
Who created you?
I was created by
Look at him.
Monarch.
Do you mean Mr. Aquino?
No.
Who in Monarch created you?
I was created by Monarch. I do not know who.
That is
That's crazy.
crazy, right? And there's one additional video that it kind of reinforces what he just said with an additional layer to it. And this is one I've played a few different times. But again, it's a little shorter. And I feel like this is the window into the film, The Manchurian Candidate, right? And even those two girls, right? I referenced on Operation GCD the other day, right? Who wrote that book, basically Programmed to Kill for Their Country or something like that.
Right.
And yeah, discussing how they were so just terrified that any handler that was aware of their trigger code phrase necessary to trigger their altars could essentially remove them of their ability to practice and engage in free will like a
Right.
normal person. And this reinforces that concept.
I was created by a government program,
Which government program?
Monarch.
And what is Monarch?
Monarch is an operation that was created by the United States government to create spies for other countries. They use children for the purpose that they are easily integrated into multiple personalities because they can dissociate. The program was to, as a young man, get adults who were powerful political leaders into positions where they could be compromised.
That was your mission.
That was the initial mission. The whole mission was for me to go into the military service and
His eyebrows, right?
become an officer.
Mhm.
And a few years after that, retire from the service. Not retire after 20 years, but after 6 years. And move to Germany. And then their initial plan to take
Remember the connection that I had just laid out as far as his reference in that interrogation interview as well, where he talks
Right.
about NAMBLA and facilitating the child pornography to Germany and the Netherlands.
Right.
run the government was to put me in an ambassador spot. And then later to come back to the United States and to run for an office. And they would be the ones who controlled everything that I did.
So you would be an operative, so to speak.
I would be a puppet.
Pretty
And you said
straightforward.
the plan broke down in 1986. You told me that you still felt that you were under the control.
I am still under their control because I do not answer phones anymore because that's how they get the others to the triggers, is what I'll call them. They're not personalities. They contain no memories at all. They were put in as hypnotic suggestions and only come out when, as I said, a code is presented to them. And that happened several times in 1989, which is why Paul and Mikey's memories are so confused. At that time, they were attempting to destroy me because they were attempting to access suicidal personalities and other personalities that would
Yep.
get me in trouble with law enforcement. When they program the personalities, or the triggers, as I call them, they would call me up and they would use a code. I would simply switch into that trigger, go to where they told me to go, whether it would be or get on an airplane because they would already have the tickets there. They would have the tickets there under a name that only that trigger would know, and go to wherever it was. There would be somebody waiting for them in that city and take them to wherever it was that they were supposed to go, bring them back to the airport, put them on the plane. They would come back home, and as soon as they walked in the door, the memory of everything that had just happened would be erased completely.
So
That's an alter.
that's an alter.
That is
Suicidal
dissociative identity disorder.
firsthand, right?
Yep,
So sad, brother. But
it is.
man, again, you know how much I love you and appreciate you, man. And I feel like we could have this conversation forever, honestly.
We could.
And
We could, dude.
there will be no lack of content if we decide to do a part 3, and I feel like we probably should at some point.
Yeah.
And I'm going to personally make a point to actually read through your recent work, as I said privately,
Yep.
because first of all, I just, out of respect, I wanted to, and
Right.
beyond that, I think, what you are covering is exactly what I find to be the most just important, and I think should be top priority, right, for people who legitimately want to push back in terms of the power cabal and what the
Right.
most degenerate aspects of this sadism involved in their lifestyles, and until we're willing to actually hopefully seek out a path, right, that could somehow lead to the protection and defense of these vulnerable children,
Right.
and at least the exposure, right, of this very common practice, then and only then do I feel like we can finally have a conversation that's worth having, with that
Right.
really, I think, transcends the two-party paradigm, transcends this level of this false framework and structured system that is so deceptive in its own right. And
Right.
so thank you again, as always, brother. I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
doing this
Thank
again
you.
at some point.
Thank you. I seriously love you too, brother. And, I think we're doing some great work here, honestly, because I think your work is just as important. That's why I always got to show up in the interviews that you end up doing and stuff. Cause it's people just really need to start like absorbing some of this stuff. I mean, dude, I don't want to be right.
Right.
This isn't fun for me.
Exactly.
I'm trying to have fun just so I don't go crazy, right?
Mhm.
I don't know how healthy it is, but shut off a bit of that empathetic feeling that, normal people get, because I can't be so empathetic all the time when I'm reading about this stuff, and
Exactly.
but I cannot accept a world where children are just used as cannon fodder.
Exactly.
I cannot live in that world. And I refuse to stand by and just let Satanists just do this, just willy-nilly, just out in the open, laughing about it. And trust me, they do. They do. And
Absolutely.
this idea that Satanists just don't fucking hurt kids. They're the only group in the world that don't hurt kids. Get the fuck out of here. That is the biggest load of bullshit I have ever heard. And you know what? Just be careful. Just pay attention. Trust your gut feelings. Never deny your instinct, because your instinct is an instinct for a reason. So, be careful out there. There's a lot of charlatans. There's a lot of people that do not have the best interest of survivors in mind. There's people out there that don't really care. There's people out there that are pushing bad information. But I can promise you, these two people right here on the screen, we're both good people, and I'm proud to call you a friend and a brother and a coworker. So I definitely appreciate your time, Austin.
Thank you, brother. I'm forever grateful, my friend, and to be, as I've said before, in the trenches on the front lines of the mind war with someone like yourself.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a beautiful. I feel like I question this every day, and I'm desperate for it to be the truth in terms of following some sort of divine path to objectively seeking the truth. And I
Right.
pray every day for that. And so I can only hope that, something we do here in terms of what appeals to us as some of the most pivotal and worthwhile information in exposing will hopefully land with many of you, because yeah, I think we're collectively shocked to our core at a certain sense.
Yeah.
And I think I'll end it with basically the question I asked when I covered the Dutroux affair. And I just said, how long can we stand idly by while the true intentions of our ruling class remain beyond the veil of public scrutiny?
Right.
And the only part of this is like, this is an intentional sort of unraveling of the very moral fabric of society, while deceptively and deliberately placing us
Right.
on that path to complete and total societal really collapse in a way, right? So
Right.
anyway, life is good. Life is beautiful. I love my family. I love my wife. I love my friends,
Same.
right? The circle I keep close. I've eliminated people who fundamentally want to drag you down into the gutter of life, and
100%.
not against them personally, but for my own well-being. And I hope that we can all continue to grow together in a way that will only improve our lives and help hopefully improve the lives of our families. So
Right.
forever.
Yeah, I'm not suicidal, and I don't plan on going anywhere.
Yeah, believe me, I am not either. So yeah, it's nothing but love from us to you guys, I'm sure.
100%.
And yeah, catch us next time. We'll announce when we decide to schedule the follow up here at some point. And
Oh yeah,
and
there's so much shit we didn't even touch on.
I know, dude. I know, as is always the case, apparently. But but hey, I think it's probably more than. Oh my god, I told you I was gonna try and do 2.5 hours. We're at 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
dude.
it's good,
I
dude.
knew it.
It's good.
All right. Well, thank you as always, brother, for taking the ride with me, and
Yep.
and to everybody in the chat, nothing but love. I appreciate you guys more than you know for showing up, and we'll catch you on the next one.